Welcome to the Fullcaster Podcast, episode 24. Our guest today is a special one for Derek and I, none other than our boss and CalSpeed's owner, Rob Niles. Plenty to talk about, not just about CalSpeed things, but maybe how the hell he got into the game in the first place, and all the other stuff that I happen to know some of these stories, BSing with him from time to time anyway, but really looking forward to getting some of those things on the old recording here. And before we do that, we're going to knock out some current events here. Our fourth episode here in Season 2. When this thing's coming out, it's going to be mid-February.
Yep.
Recording it in December. One of the opening 4 that we were able to do here in the off-season. Once we get done with this one, I think almost everything else is going to be in the new year, most likely. And speaking of the new year, we've kicked things off pretty good. It's been a lot of fun trying to get new people on the podcast, trying to get different people, and then, again, doing those on locations at Andy's and Stu's, and then obviously this place is already on location anyway.
Right.
But, as we start going forward, it's going to be a little bit tougher to do the on-location stuff, but we're still going to try to get with some of the other teams, and I know that we want to get to some of the other tracks as well. But, the other thing going on right now is people getting ready for the new year. We are fresh off the finale for LAKC just 2 days ago.
Yeah, finally.
And the it was actually the same size event as the opener for those guys, and it was a lot of people here getting ready for the upcoming season, whether it be Winter Series over in Florida or Challenge over here. But we saw a lot of people from out of town actually trying to get some seat time right now.
Big 100cc numbers.
Wow.
Absolutely. Across the board. I mean, Masters has had maybe a handful, and I think you guys got, between Masters and Super, you got up to almost double digits or had double digits.
Yeah, we had 9 in Masters.
Yeah.
And 2 in Super, so it was 11 of them total. But
compared to the usual 5 that you get.
No, it was good.
And
then we had 22 in Junior.
Oh, wow.
22 in Junior, and I want to say it eclipsed 30 at Senior. It was damn close if it wasn't.
I know on a Saturday practice I had 27 drivers on track for Senior. And I think if I was looking at the time at the leaderboard for lifetime, I should say, I had like 24 or so.
Man,
so there's still, a lot.
I swore it was more than that. It looked like it was deeper in 10 rows at the main there, but I didn't actually look at live timing. But it was a fun race to watch. A lot of heavy hitters. Again, people getting ready for the new season. If you're not in the championship hunt for LAKC, it was really it was a Winter Series race that you could do a little practice action, which you don't normally get a chance to do in December. So we saw some pretty good numbers, just people trying to do that. So, and speaking of the new year and things get going, by this time, when this comes out in February, those things will have already kicked off, right? We've already had the January month in the books, which means the opening rounds for the Florida Winter Tour, SCUSA Winter Series, and even Challenge to be in the books at this point. And I want to say...
Which just got moved to February.
For CalSpeed, but the Phoenix opener,
Correct,
the Phoenix opener is still going to be in the books. So all the January races are going to be done. We're already going to know who's kind of, hitting their stride and who, testing paid off and those kinds of things. So,
and you even got to do some testing this last weekend.
That's right. Yeah, I ran 2 classes, KA Masters and Rock GP for the first time. So that is an interesting package. I hope to talk about that a little bit more as we go on through the year. But it's a challenge. It is a hell of a challenge. I had no idea the difference between what I've done X30 once at Supernats. Well, that's not fair. I did that, and then I did 2 races. Right, I did here for LAKC and then Buttonwillow. I always forget about those. But X30 is basically a faster KA. Yeah, the way you drive it. The Rock is not that way. The GP is completely
There's more
different.
going on with it.
Yeah, it's a hell of a lot different. But I'm going to be looking forward to at this point. I already have hopefully a first round of Challenge in the books, rounds 1 and 2 in Phoenix. And we're heading into rounds 3 and 4 here at CalSpeed. So, we'll see. Hopefully, between now and then, I'll have gotten some seat time and be worth a shit.
Yeah, we'll see, right?
Yeah, it's
You did get a head start on the tire this weekend, so that helps out.
That's right. Yeah, now we got a chance to run on the Levanto tire. That's another piece of the challenge, too.
Yeah.
The way I felt, it was maybe comparable to the blue, the Evenco blue that we were used to running on the KA. Does not have as much side bite, and the Evenco Blue has never been...
It's never been the tire to say, it has side bite.
Yeah, it's never been accused of the big side bite as you would have from, say,
like
Bridgestone.
The Bridgestone.
Yeah, the Bridgestone always felt like it had more. I only drove the Wild Hour once, but I was at Challenge last year. I'll tell you right now, though, the Levant doesn't have that side bite. It's
Right.
definitely got a stiff sidewall on it, but by now everybody knows that.
Yeah, so it doesn't
old news,
matter.
But it's definitely not the quote better tire. I'll tell you that. But anyway, yeah, that's it for the current events. I think it's time to get right into the game here, and man, I'm excited to bring our guest on. So without further ado, let's bring on the man himself, Rob Niles. Rob Niles, thank you so much for allowing us to do this on a day that we would normally be doing work. But yeah, for taking the time, man. Thanks for coming on the show.
Yes, it's good to be here, man. This is fun.
I think. Yeah. we'll see what happens, right? Have you gotten a chance to listen to a couple of them? I know you listened to your dad's, but did you listen to anything else?
Yeah, I've listened to a couple of them.
Yeah. And what do you think?
I got some critiques, but no, I think it's really cool.
Right?
Yeah. Some revisionist history, but no, I think it's really cool what you guys are doing. I mean, it's fun because it's just this open format. I mean, even preparing for this, I was like, well, I filled out the questionnaire, but I'm like, it'll be fun to just kind of talk off the top of my head and
right,
kind of see where it goes.
Well, and that's what really the whole point of it is, and what's been fun so far is just kind of hearing some of the stories and stuff like that. And yeah, actually, Derek said it just before we hit the go button here, like we don't really need to ask what it is that you do. I mean, you are the owner of Cal Speed and whatnot, but maybe what we can do is we can just go, why?
Yeah.
Why did
Good
you,
question.
before we get into Little Rob and what he did as a kid, why did you decide to open up a kart track? What was the thought process there?
It's funny. It does stem directly from Little Rob. That's really what it came from. And it was at the time I started the track and really the karting company in general, karting was very popular in Southern California. It was growing. It was a good time in the economy. There was 5 or 6 really active tracks and different racing series going on. So I wanted to do something different. I didn't want to just be another one. And obviously you guys know Arrive and Drive's basically our format, but it really came back to let's find a way to showcase the driver. Let's find a way to make it so that if you've got some skill, if you've got some talent, you're going to rise to the top. And that's really driven everything we've done to this point, and it stemmed from early days, not having a budget, not having the equipment, but feeling like I think I've got some skill. I wanted to create a formula where people could come in and go, yeah, I do, or no, I don't, or it's me. It's the driver that needs to be worked on. All the excuses were gone, right? So that was really what started Karting Ventures, which became Cal Speed.
Gotcha. Well, and actually, since you bring that up, kind of coming back from when you were a kid. Now we kind of know a little bit about from how things kind of got started. A little bit from what from Bob's episode, but what are the early memories of you and how did you get involved in racing or karting or otherwise?
Yeah, but growing up, my dad raised karts back in the 60s, as you guys know from his story. So kind of in the very early days in the Midwest. Obviously, it started on the West Coast in the late 50s, but so he was kind of there in like the initial growth period, and then but that was well before I was born. And then he raced stock cars and late models and all that. And my understanding was, did that terrible idea, got a girlfriend, got married, had kids, and then racing stops, right? But there were always pictures lying around, and it intrigued me, and we kind of lived out in the sticks, and, I had a dirt bike, and I just found myself kind of naturally, if there was 2 of something, we were racing, right? If it was 2 BMX bikes, 2 dirt bikes, 2 lawnmowers, 4 sets of legs, we were racing. It's just how it kind of worked out in the middle of the sticks. So I just had that natural desire, I guess. And it really started in earnest when we went on a family vacation to a place called Wisconsin Dells, which is kind of like a bunch of theme parks, but not like Disneyland theme parks, like smaller. It's on a river, so there's a lot of water shows. There's a lot of bumper boats and go-kart tracks. There was the House of the Future. So it was that kind of shticky stuff, and it was all motels. And I remember a couple I had to be maybe 9 or 10 years old, and most of the places we went to wouldn't allow kids to drive karts.
You must be this tall kind of thing.
Yeah, right? Yeah, exactly. And we found some place on the outskirts of town, and some hillbilly running it was like, hey man, you got $10, you can drive.
Yeah.
So my dad and I went out
Number
and
one
drove.
customer.
Yeah, exactly. We might have been the only one that day.
Yeah.
But we went out and drove, and I mean, obviously the weight difference and all that. But I remember him being like, "Hey, you've kind of got some stuff figured out. Like you're okay." And I was bit. And I think the guy had a cart for sale. I mean, this is like a piece of junk, concession, metal bar around it, go-kart.
Wait, sorry. What kind of carts are we talking about here? Are they? Because I know what a Thrillville Boomers kind of cart looks like. With all the plastic and like that. It's big and clunky.
Almost
but
a car, yeah.
Are you driving something like that?
No. These are like metal wraparound bumpers with bumpers. There's no shock absorbers or anything. It's literally a metal sled that has a motor on it and a bench seat, basically.
Man.
Gotcha.
And what's the track like? Are they doing cones? Is it like a bunch of tires?
No, it was like tires. It was a purpose-built concession track, so it was maybe, I'm going way off memory here, a quarter a mile, if that, a little kidney-shaped track.
Gotcha.
Right.
10-year-old Rob, as he's making notes, is like, when I get older.
Yeah, exactly. But I think the fact that I didn't spin it or, whatever and kept up with the old man, he was like, hey, you got something. So they had this cart for sale. I mean, the thing's a piece of garbage from when I remember. And I remember looking at my dad like, hey. My dad's like, no. If you want to go karting, we'll get you a proper cart. But you got to save money. My dad's thing was always, you got to have skin in the game. So you got to save money. And I vaguely remember that ride home, me being like, okay, so how much money do I need to save? When do we get this cart? Mm-hmm. And it was like, just save the money and we'll figure it out. And I'm fairly certain he thought that that would be the end of the conversation, right? 9-year-old me was going to go back home and go play with Legos or whatever and forget about it.
Lincoln Logs or whatever it was.
Yeah, nice. Exactly. Yeah, it was sticks and stones. But I started making money. I literally went door to door that winter because that was like toward the end of summer. So I remember I mowed some lawns. I went door to door, mowed lawns, and we lived in the sticks. So people had like 1 or 2 acres. And I want to say I was charging $10 to like mow 2 acres of lawn, And then people had really long driveways. So when the winter came, I was like, I'll shovel your driveway for $10. And people are looking at me like, yeah, sure, dummy, go for it.
Yeah, not the shrewd businessman he is.
Yeah, exactly. But springtime came, and I remember I had $900. I specifically remember that amount.
Wow.
And I was like, I got $900. And
your dad's like, where'd you get all this money from?
Yeah, exactly. And if I'm not mistaken, my dad also said, well, yeah, you do, but you used my equipment, you used my lawnmower and my gas, so we have to deduct that. But it was a good lesson taught, early business lesson. And we ended up going to Gem Products, which, Gem, I don't know if you guys even know that name, but they were a big manufacturer. They were similar to like an RLV back in the day, an exhaust manufacturer, and they made a bunch of other stuff. They did stuff in-house. And we went there. My dad remembered some of the guys from his racing days and got talking. Hey, my son liked to get interested. Where can we race around here? What can we do? And how much is a race cart? They didn't sell race carts. They sold yard carts. They're like, oh, well, race carts, you can get race carts, but they're expensive. But this thing, you could play with this. I don't remember how much it was. It might have been $1,000, $1,200. You guys saw the picture of it. It was a yard cart.
Did I show you the picture?
I remember seeing it when we did the slideshow.
Yeah, it's like 4 inches off the ground status. This is like not a proper race cart at all.
Yeah, and I'm just like, it's cool, man. It's got a steering wheel. It's got 4 wheels. It's got an engine.
Had you guys gone to a race or anything like that, or was you were just going through the motions of saving the money? And
I don't remember. We may have gone to the club at that point, and it was actually a club or a track my dad had raced at that was still around. So I think we might have gone and seen that at some point in the season. The other thing was, at the time, I was playing baseball, and I was not through the school. It was like through a like a community league or something. Whatever, yeah, exactly. And I was decent at it, and I remember I had a chance to like try out for the Illinois All-Star team or something that year. And my parents were like, you can't do both. You got to pick. So it was, once the baseball season was over, then we could go look into the karting thing, which was usually like 3 or 4 races left in the season.
Right.
So I don't remember what was the chicken and what was the egg, but I remember we ended up getting this cart, putting it in the back of our K5 Blazer, taking it to the track, and then being like, yeah, no, you can't race that. because it didn't have Nerf bars. It didn't have anything safety wired. I think it had a mechanical brake.
What year is this roughly?
This is 79, 80-ish.
Okay.
So, and at that point,
we've moved on a little bit beyond yard carts at this point.
Yeah, like Margays, Coyotes. There was some Hartmans. That was all mostly American-made stuff, but they had figured out, geometry and different metals, and the carts were handling decent. It wasn't quite the European invasion yet.
Yeah, and you probably didn't need as much ground clearance.
No, I had a bit more than was necessary at the time with those wheelbarrow tires on it.
Could be an advantage.
Yeah.
Could be.
Yeah. If I went off track, I was just
Keep
as quick.
going.
It went faster.
Yeah, I lost no time off course. But
so you show up to Tech and they go, no
Sorry,
chance.
kid.
Bud.
yeah, no, and I do remember there being snickers and laughter. I mean, it's kind of maybe history is has sweetened the story a bit, but I do remember it being just the elation of going to the racetrack and then the huge just punch, gut punch to be like, no, you're not racing, you're going home.
Right.
And my dad is as crafty and handy as he is. We got back home and he busted out the welder and some pipe, and he welded Nerf bars right on the frame and took care of all the other stuff that needed to be done. And we were back the next weekend.
Wow.
So you guys go from you said that when you were talking to Gem, the Gem Products place, that you were telling them you wanted to go racing, and they basically sold you this other ride because it was cheaper. But they knew that you wanted to go racing, right? I mean,
it was probably one of those things they weren't taking you seriously, honestly.
It was. I don't know if it was that so much as it's probably a combination of factors, right? It was probably my dad maybe not wanting to go all in on race carts and stuff. Plus, he maybe didn't realize how much had changed in the time he'd been out. He'd been out at that point 10, 15 years.
He goes, oh, this will be perfect for Tech. He's like, they'll walk right through it.
Yeah, I think, it looked enough like a race cart. And you know what? In retrospect, he was kind of right, because that thing taught me how to drive. That thing was so stiff, and it just was hard. You couldn't put a wheel wrong. I mean, you couldn't do anything wrong. You had to drive it on a rail because it did not handle at all.
Man,
it barely turned.
So you guys take this yard cart. You get the finger the first time. You head back the second time. And what class are you running? What's our engine here, and what are we doing? And how many people in your class? Things like that.
At that time, there was you were either on a Briggs 5-horse, the flathead 5-horsepower Briggs, which is the equivalent of like the the 206 these days, or you were in a Yamaha. And I think the junior classes were just the Briggs. And they didn't have cadet carts. I mean, at least they didn't run them from what I remember. Like you were, I was 10 years old maybe.
Now everyone said it was a kid getting an adult-sized cart.
Yeah.
And that's what it was.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And they probably had some reed valves back then, or rotary valves, but that was kind of like the run anything class. But the big classes were Briggs or Yamaha. There was probably 10 to 12 kids in the class. And that would swell up. There was, in our area, there was 4 or 5 clubs within about a 90-minute drive.
Oh, okay.
From the
Not
center of the
unlike here,
radius.
actually, at that time.
Yeah, it was kind of similar. I mean, we were outskirts of Chicago, so there was, club or two in Wisconsin, a club or two in Indiana, Michigan, Illinois. So you had some option, but that also kept it kind of spread out, where each club maybe was 10 to 12 guys per class.
Gotcha. So you go to this race. You're doing the Briggs deal. You guys run it as is, aside from the Nerf bars that are welded now to the side of this thing and the safety stuff. You run it as is.
The first couple of races. So this was at the end. This is probably like August into September, because baseball season's over now.
Right.
So we're just going out for the last couple of races. That thing is bone stock. I would hope the governor was disconnected. But that's my story as to why I was so darn slow probably those first couple times. And I think my dad was then seeing like, holy cow, racing has evolved. A lot's changed. Yeah, back then they were building motors and stuff, but chassis weren't really part of the game. So he now saw, okay, here's what we can do. There's stuff that can be done to this thing. And so that winter, I think, is when he really dug in and said, all right, we've got this cart, but we can make this engine. We can do something with this engine. And that's when he started working on it. And, the next season, I think we went back and started getting at least recognized, like doing better than we should have with that cart for sure.
I would think
Yeah.
anything other than last.
Yeah.
It's got to be better. Unbelievable.
And the people behind you finished. It wasn't like it was you and
Yeah.
then DNFs, right?
Yeah. No, I mean, I was getting podiums, I think that first full year, it was like there was some thirds and seconds. I don't remember if I won or not. My memory's terrible on this stuff, but that was probably 80, 81. And I do remember there being, a handful of
You got some hardware.
trophies. Yeah. That year.
Nice.
And you run the whole season. Have you put baseball behind you, or are you still playing some baseball?
No, I'm still playing baseball, but I think that year either we didn't do as well, like we didn't make it to the playoffs, so my season ended a little bit earlier, and I think I opted not to try out for All-Stars. I don't remember how it all worked. But
what position did you play?
I was first base and pitcher.
Okay.
So probably end of July, early August, my season was done, so we could go racing, we could go karting now, and it was once a month, Sundays. Similar to what it is now.
Gotcha. So you guys end up going out there and getting some hardware, stealing some pieces of, was it plastic or was it metal? Must have been metal trophies back then.
It's funny. They haven't changed a whole lot.
Oh, really?
They were, those marble bases with the plastic components to them. Yeah.
Yeah. So you're stealing some plastic from the other kids. You got to be doing things. I would assume the sidelines are going, there's no freaking way. And you're doing pretty damn well. Bob's building the engines then. There's no tuning to speak of, I assume, on this thing, except for air pressure or whatever.
Yeah.
And
Ride height, you mean? Yeah. It wasn't so much the air pressure as much as it was how high the thing was off the track.
I mean, you guys get a hell of a lot of bang for the buck on this thing. How long do you keep running this ride, and when do you get something maybe a little more proper?
I want to say I probably had this for 2 to 3 years. So
Wow.
into that second year.
Longevity.
Yeah.
Well, I guess if it's working.
Yeah.
I mean, damn.
Yeah. And I want to say,
Certainly wasn't wearing out.
yeah.
Yeah.
And my dad has a much better memory of all this stuff than I do. But I want to say it didn't go away until my brother wanted to get involved. And then I think it became his car.
Hand me down, yeah.
Yeah, we're not getting rid of anything. So you
Right.
might have noticed my dad's a collector. So,
Yeah.
I think my brother
I think
got
I still
it.
see that cart around here every now and again.
Yeah,
Nice.
yeah. Surprised it wasn't.
Right.
But yeah, no, I mean there was a story my dad loves, and I do too, where it was like the season championship race, and the thing was, because we didn't do the full season, we were never in the points. We'd come in halfway through. We'd normally come in. They used to have what was called a mid-season championship, and it was like a 2-day. Like back then, you P-picked. You started the first heat wherever the P-pick was. The second heat was an invert of the first heat, and then the main was your combination of the two.
Right.
So they'd have what was called a mid-season championship, and that would be they'd actually have practice and qualifying on Saturday, and then on Sunday you'd race according to how you qualified. So it was like a proper race weekend. But this wasn't a track like a Cal Speed. Like it was open 1 day a month, the club race day.
Got it.
And they were out there getting the, all the weeds and stuff off the track prior to getting on track that
Right.
morning. You'd have 1 or 2 quick practice sessions, and then we went right into heats. We didn't qualify. So we'd start right around that mid-season championship race, and that would be kind of our season, would be that half season. And I remember to be in the points, which is still kind of similar today, you had to buy a membership. And I remember my dad being like, we're not buying no membership. So we could have actually done really well even with a half season, but
Right.
we weren't in the points. So we'd go to the banquet every year and just hope we'd win something in the auction, because it was like we're not getting any hardware because we
Right.
weren't members. But yeah, I want to say it was probably 2 or 3 years on that cart until I think my brother got started, and then I got like an older used Margay.
So that puts
Okay.
you at 13, 14, somewhere right in there.
Yeah, probably around 12, 13.
And are we getting out of juniors? Or were we still juniors?
Juniors were still up to 15 back then.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. And I don't remember. I think there was like junior 1 and junior 2, but it was all adult carts. So you were like
Taller or shorter?
9 to 12 and then 12 to 15. So kind of similar to what it is now.
Gotcha.
Just the motors. I mean, back then, the juniors were the quickest thing on track because they had full adult carts, the same engines,
Oh,
but they
yeah.
weighed a heck of a lot less.
Right.
So if you were like a junior in a 2-stroke, you were going
Flying.
way faster than you should have. You know, you're faster than the adults. You were the fastest thing on track.
Man, we still actually have that every once in a while at the juniors.
Yeah, sometimes
like,
they're able to get a little bit quicker.
They don't have the restrictor or whatever. So your brother Joe, he gets into the game and he gets the old yard cart. And what do you get into, and how do you guys just end up going? We need to get another cart. We need to get one for Rob. How do you go about that process, and what class do you end up running after that?
What I think happens is I'm pretty certain it was 83, so I would have been 14, that we did some traveling. I know my brother and I both had carts that year. And so I must have had like a used, we always had Margay, so I had a used Margay.
After the yard cart.
After the yard cart. Yeah. Yeah. And for me, that was like, holy cow. Like I was stepping out of a pickup truck into a 911.
Can you remember that? Do you remember getting into that proper go-kart for the first time?
It's funny. I don't remember that, but I remember a friend at the club that we raced had a Trick. So there used to be this cart called a Trick, Trick. And those things were just made for 4-strokes, short track sort of stuff. And I remember getting to drive this thing, and it was almost like, what was that? Like this thing, the steering wheel works. Like you can actually use your butt to make this thing handle. Like it was night and day. I remember just being blown away by this thing. And probably thinking in the back of my head, if I had one of these with my dad's motors,
we'd be killing it.
Be unstoppable,
you know?
And so that's kind of what happened the next year, because in 83 we got this used, I think it was a Panther X, a Margay Panther X. And my dad's motors, my dad just figured out those 4-strokes. He just knew them, and we weren't machining anything. He was still working with the stock motor. Everyone else was machining and stuff. And I think it was the winter of 82 that he got hooked up with a machinist, because my dad wasn't about to pay anyone to blueprint a motor, right?
Right. Show me how to do it.
But yeah, he ended up meeting a guy who had a machine shop, and I think his kid was getting in karting. And so kind of the deal was we take them under our wing. I'd coach his kid, and my dad would, be able to have access to the machine shop. And then that next year we were just unstoppable. It was the combination of that cart, those motors, just everything clicked. And
a full season or still halves?
I think that was our first full season, was 83.
So now baseball's taking a hike.
I gotten out of baseball. I think that's because that's when I graduated 8th grade. And I was like, I don't want to play baseball anymore. Yeah. If I do, I'll play in high school. Mm-hmm. But I'm not in this community thing. So now we can go full bore into karting.
Got it. So things kind of lined up. You get the ride underneath. You already had the engines. The focus is now just to drive and stuff. And as you say, unstoppable. What does unstoppable mean at the end of the day?
That year, if I'm almost certain we won everything we entered, like every heat, every main. We ran the full season at our club, and we traveled to like 3 or 4 of those other locals, and there was like a regional event, and we won everything we entered that year.
Wow.
It was like unheard of. And it was just, everything just clicked,
That's awesome.
Yeah, it was fun. And you started to get this feeling like, I remember we got some attention. Like I got a test in a 2-cycle. We got some other stuff because people are like, these guys got it figured out. And we didn't have money. We were still showing up out of the back of our own car, and we didn't have anything fancy like an Easy Up or any of that stuff.
Right.
We were there to race, sunburn and all.
Right. You have this killer year, and if Bob and Co and yourself weren't already thinking that maybe Rob's got something, it's obvious at this point. So you start putting it. Do things start clicking here, or do you start going, man, I might want to actually try to do this? Or did you even have any thoughts outside of what you were doing? Did you even know that there was bigger racing going on, whether it be karts, cars, or otherwise?
Yeah, we were definitely fans. My dad's always been a huge stock car, NASCAR fan, and IndyCar fan. I was a big IndyCar fan.
Okay.
Just starting to discover Formula One. Back then it was maybe 1 or 2 races of Formula One were on CBS a year. So I was like, I got to watch that, Mm-hmm. But I think I was probably naive at the time, and we were kind of fiercely independent, maybe to a fault. Like we didn't trust people. And as opportunities started to come and sponsors started to come, I think we would often look at it and go, well, we're beating them. why would we get on their stuff? Like, I think it was kind of naive that, well, maybe they want to partner with us because maybe they don't have the right driver, or there's a good combination here. But we always looked at it like, well, what do they want from us? Mm-hmm. So I got a chance to test a 2-stroke that year, and that was cool. And then that kind of turned into a ride. And then a shop had come to us, a guy who had manufactured his own carts and stuff all in-house. And we ended up, doing a deal with him for the following year. So stuff was happening. I was probably a little naive to understand what it was, that was sponsorship. That's how it works. It's like you're driving someone else's stuff and you're not paying for it. But then the next year, I wouldn't say we struggled. We just weren't as dominant. We'd still win, but we'd have seconds, we'd have thirds, we'd have some challenges along the way. And so by the end of that year, I want to say this was 84. I think it came down to the season championship, and it was, we're now competing in the points. The year before we'd won and
sprung the money for those memberships.
Yeah. Well, we don't have to pay for the stuff anymore, right?
Have money left over.
And if I remember this correctly, we were like right there in the points, but I had to win. It was kind of like a winner take all sort of thing at the finale race. And I think back then the season championship race and that mid-season race I was telling you about were double points races.
Oh.
So they were important. And I think my dad was now racing the kart I had raced the year prior, the one that we'd done so well with. So going into that final race, I actually remember this. We're like in the garage Friday night going, what are we going to do? What are we going to do? What can we do? We had the sponsor cart, but it's like, what are we going to do? It's like,
so you had a little bit of trepidation thinking that maybe your sponsored ride wasn't as good as what you'd had before? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, it wasn't. I mean, it wasn't performing as well as the other had. And this guy had a bunch of experimental stuff on there. He was already experimenting with, independent, rear, not suspension, but like a differential program. He had weight jackers. I mean, it was very innovative and ahead of its time. It just wasn't refined yet.
Right.
So these weight jackers were, all these like cross tubes and stuff, and they were sprung and all these things. And he would just try this, and I'd go out there. We didn't have test days back then.
Right.
Race days were test days. So I'd go out there and be like, this thing's undrivable. And then he'd fix it and do something else to it. And okay, now I'd go out and, and compete. And so it was,
it's kind of like going back to the old yard cart a little bit, where you had to you had to pick up where the cart was leaving you hanging, or, in the dust.
Yeah. And we didn't understand, I think, our role. We were like, hey, we want to go out and compete for wins. We didn't understand the role was I was test driver.
Right.
And there weren't test days back then. So race days were test days. But I remember we made the decision that Friday night, like, okay, we're dropping the sponsor. And my dad and I'm going to drive that same cart. But my dad was racing now, so he was already competing. So we were going to share the cart. So we show up the next day at the track, and we're like, here to the sponsor, you can, thanks, but no thanks, take your stuff back. Which was, obviously a terrible thing to do to a sponsor at the finale, to be like, yeah, we're giving up your stuff.
Yeah. But you were going for that championship, and that's where you guys are driven on that.
Yeah, we want to win. And so, my dad and I share this cart. So in between every session, we're moving pedals. And
was this when you guys showed up late?
Yes.
That's the story where you're talking about they
showed up late, had to pick the cart up over the fence, something like that. Yeah.
Yeah, there was no pits. This was a tiny little track. And And again, this is a year where a lot of different teams, or not teams, but guys from other tracks would come to each other's like season championship races and stuff. And, our little class that was normally 12 to 15 guys, it swelled to 20, 25, and all the classes did. So we don't even have a pit spot. We just got to get our stuff in. And we've got enough friends that if we can get the cart in, we're good. But we couldn't get to the paddock. Like you didn't pit out of your car back then. You took your stuff out of your car, you took it into a little small paddock area, and your car was wherever you parked it in the lot.
Right.
So yeah, I vaguely remember that we had to like carry the stuff over the fence, hand it to people, get help getting it down. We missed a session, and it was one of those just perfect for the books, perfect storytelling. But I want to say, I think both my dad and I qualified on pole. Both of us won our races. And we were there until like midnight. No exaggeration, because they were like, there's no way that thing, you can't just do that. You can't just get out of this sponsored deal, jump into this thing and go out and dominate again. And they took that engine apart to every possible piece.
Yeah.
And the guy, the kid the dad whose kid we beat, just kept going. Like, he was just standing there. I honestly remember I think it was like $100 to protest a motor. And if it passed, then we got to keep the money. And if it failed, he got his money back and we got disqualified. And he just kept going like, tear it down further. And I think they made him put in more money at one point because the tech guys were like, we've teched everything. Take it apart.
Man.
So I remember we got like $200 or something like that.
Yeah.
And we're just sitting there like being just jerks about it, being like, how are we going to spend all this money, Dad? And both of us just, so, but yeah, that was, it was a different time.
And
that's funny.
You win the championship, which is a junior 2 or junior something 4-cycle, right?
Yeah.
And he wins whatever the other class is.
Yeah. Senior 4-cycle or whatever he's running.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. And is that your last season in juniors, or did you have the gall to come back after that?
Yeah. I think the next year was then my option year. So I think when you were 15,
you could bump up.
They gave you the option. Mm-hmm. I think now it's like if you turn 16 in the year, I'm not exactly sure how it.
You turn 12, you're moving up to seniors.
Yeah.
You kidding me?
But so yeah, I moved up, and I was young because my birthday's in February, so I was young. I was 15 for the year,
right?
But moved up to senior the next year.
And what were you driving at that point?
So at that point, I was on the year that 84 year when I was in the 4-stroke. There was a guy, Mike Victorio, who gave me a ride in his cart, which was a 2-stroke. So I was running both classes. I was running the 4-cycle class in my sponsored cart, and then I was running 2-cycle in his cart, technically sponsored. He ran it in senior. I ran it in the junior 2-stroke class.
Gotcha.
And that was an EMEC chassis with a Perillo motor. And I remember being like, I got to have one of those.
I'm done with this 4-stroke thing after I go and kick everybody's butt.
Yeah, we'd actually we did pretty well in that class. We didn't run the full season. We ran like a smattering. But I remember at the season championship, I was supposed to race that cart. And we got there, and I remember Mike telling my dad or something, taking my dad aside, and my dad's like, okay, we're not going to run that today. We're going to focus on the 4-stroke stuff. And what I later found out was, like, one of the other dads had come up to him and was like, look, my kid needs to win. He needs the first place points to win this championship. I don't want you guys messing this thing up. And I think it was like, can I go out there and be a wingman? And we're like, yeah, no, we're not going to do that.
We don't do the wingman
we go out
thing.
there, we're going to race to win. So we did everything wrong, basically.
Yeah, making a lot of
doubt
friends.
The sponsors.
Didn't make a lot of friends. Yeah. Like I said, we were fiercely independent to a fault.
Man. So you that next year, so you make the move to 2-stroke, and I happen to know you also got into road racing as well. Has this started to blossom yet on the road racing side, or does that happen here soon?
No, I want to say that would happen the first year we did the 2-strokes, because our club, River Valley Kart Club, started putting on, or maybe they'd already been doing it and I just wasn't aware, but they put on a couple of endurance races, or enduros, what they called them, at a track called Blackhawk Farms in Wisconsin. And it's like a 1.5-mile road course. And they'd put on, for the lay down carts, but also the sprint carts. And the big difference was they were all hour-long races. So they were 60-minute races on this big track. So I think we got talked into going up there to one of them that year and just kind of got bit. We're like, oh, this is awesome. So at that time, you would do both with the same cart. So you'd have a sprint cart, you'd run your club races, but then you'd go run the couple of enduros that your club put on each year. And I think that was, it had to be that first full year in the 2-strokes that we did both.
So that was, you've moved on to basically seniors, made that jump, and so now you're doing the sprint and road race as a senior driver. Gotcha. And this is all in the 2-strokes in both.
Yeah.
You don't do 4-stroke anymore at that point.
Correct.
Gotcha. And how did this first year go on the two different disciplines?
It went pretty well from what I remember. We actually went to a couple of Man Cup races.
Oh, okay,
back
right.
Then.
WKA.
Yeah, we went to, I don't even remember what tracks. My dad would remember all this, but we showed reasonably. I want to say I qualified top 5. This was probably a 30-person deep class with all the teams and sponsors like we'd have today at like a Pro Kart level event or what like IKF Region 7 used to be. And we showed up and did well, but it was funny because I remember there being like those guys ran together every month on this traveling show. And when you came in as an outsider, it was like room was not made.
Indeed.
And yeah, I mean, I wasn't the only one because there was a handful of us that came from the club and we're like, hey, let's go do that Man Cup race. And all of us had a similar experience where we all had big, X's on our helmets. Like, he's not one of us.
Yeah. Not just the rookie status. It was
definitely.
Just watch out for that guy. Did you guys get a new cart? Or were you able to get a deal through another guy, again, like you had before?
No, it's funny you asked that. So at the banquet, this is the year, the four cycle, and my dad and I won in the same cart.
Right. Because technically at this point, you have no ride left for the new year.
Yeah, we burned our bridges. No rides are left.
No friends.
We go to the banquet, and Emick used to donate a cart to be raffled off at the banquet. And I remember it got raffled off to a guy, and I don't remember who it was, but I want to say he either had just bought a cart or he was a Margay guy or something. And I remember my dad went right up to him and was like, what are you going to do with that cart? And we ended up buying the cart that night at the banquet and took it home with us.
Wow.
Yeah.
Oh, that's cool.
So our first ever brand new cart aside from the yard cart. And I mean, that was one awesome winter, one long winter looking at that thing being like,
yeah.
Emick. I have an Emick Star. This thing's awesome. My life is just going to be so different now. And we had a Comet K55 was our engine choice for that year. And it was that was a cool year. And we competed. I mean, it was my first year in seniors. And I remember, and I probably had just started growing at that point, but I had like a growth spurt maybe around that time. So I was the noticeable little guy in this class of seniors, but did well, mixed it up. I think got some podiums, got some wins. And
at this point, were you thinking, was the thought of progressing outside of karting a thing, or it was just like, no, keep doing karting and try to move up in the sport?
I think that's really when I started to think about it, because there was the sense that, okay, I'm decent at this. People are telling me I'm decent at this, but totally naive as to how the world worked in racing. And, it was kind of like, well, I'm winning out here at my little track in Podunk, Illinois. Someone's going to notice this. And, and we just didn't, like I said, but that's kind of where the fiercely independent thing came in.
Yeah.
We weren't teamed up with anyone, and there were ways to be connected that we just didn't know of.
Yeah.
But that said, it was still for the sake of doing it. It was still the excitement of doing it. And it was the thing, my parents were divorced at this point. My dad lived about an hour away. So this was like our thing. This was the thing we did together. So for me, it satisfied that, getting to do something with my dad, and this was my sport.
Right.
And at this point I was out of baseball, and most of my friends were involved in some sort of a high school sport. This was my thing. So we weren't working toward anything bigger for sure, but it was definitely probably percolating in the back of my head that, like, what could this become, if anything?
You do that that first year, and as you say, it's in the back of your head, but you start traveling around, you got the Emick cart and whatnot. Where does this end up, and how long do you end up karting from here? Now that you've made it into seniors, what is the shining achievement here in this go-kart period of time, and how long does this last here, turning 15 or whatever and through seniors? How'd that senior career go, and how long did it last?
I want to say we only did like a year at the sprint level because we really got bit by the enduros. So I think my dad had bought a laydown cart for himself because he wanted to get back into it. So I had a sprint, my brother had a sprint, my dad had a laydown, and we were just doing the enduro races. I think we still were doing some sprint stuff, but we were going to, like, at this point, like Blackhawk, Road America, some of these other, tracks that were fairly local to us, IRP, Indianapolis Raceway Park. I don't remember if there was maybe a couple in Michigan, I think Grattan and a couple others. So we had kind of done this year where we had a toe in the enduro stuff and a toe in the sprint stuff, but we weren't like working toward any sort of a championship. It wasn't until the following year, which would have been 86, that we're like, we're going to go after the enduro stuff. We're going to lay down carts, and we're going to go after the enduro stuff. And that probably happened like mid-'85. We started to kind of build up and prepare for that. And then in '86, we ran the WK Enduro Series back then was like 15 races over the course of the season. It was at all the Watkins Glen, Charlotte, Daytona, top-notch tracks. Yeah, full long season. And they took your best like 8 out of 14 or 15 finishes. So you basically had like 6 or 7 throwaways. And they did it because it was a national touring thing, right? It was the entire, Midwest and Eastern, United States. So our plan was if we can get to 8, right, we've at least got a full slate of races. And I want to say we ended up getting to like 6 because budget just, ran out. But we ran Road America, Road Atlanta, Daytona, like I said, Watkins Glen, just some awesome tracks.
Was there one that scared you? Like you did a lap and you pulled in, you're like, ugh.
Probably, going to, I think probably my first Roval was Charlotte.
Mm-hmm.
I'm almost positive. Charlotte or Rockingham. I don't remember which one. But that coming down, we're in these little enduro carts. We're doing 115, maybe 110 on the straightaways.
Mm-hmm.
And then you got to come down and, off on the apron and come back in. And that apron's not designed for something that's 7 feet long and an inch off the ground. So you had to hit it just right or it got so squirrely. And I remember just not being prepared for that. And the draft.
Yeah.
I mean, we had draft in a straight line at the road courses, but the draft on the oval was insane, as you can imagine. And everything's rattling. And I mean, they have a little bit more streamlined body work today, but like, your shoes are untied and they're flapping everywhere. So you learn, okay, I better duct tape my shoelaces down. And, it was like a fast learning curve for sure. But, I wouldn't say scared. It was, and I think the speed was all relative.
Right. Yeah.
Back then, because you're like, all right, I'm going this fast, but everyone around me is going this fast.
Mm-hmm.
So you're not, and standing outside of it, it doesn't look fast because it's this humongous oval.
Right. It looks like they're just crawling around the track.
Yeah. So when you're watching practice, you're like, that doesn't look hard or intimidating.
Yeah, I mean,
you couldn't see them coming off the oval, though. that was what you couldn't see.
Well, you think about the same thing. You watch like Daytona 24-hour or whatever. You watch a car that's limping along at 100 miles an hour.
Right.
He looks like he's crawling. Everybody else is flying by him. Kind of the same scenario. You're not going that quick. How does this not quite full season go for you guys?
We did decent. It was a huge learning curve. And part of our challenge, again, was just from a budget standpoint. We're traveling to these races. A lot of guys are getting in a day or two early, setting up, getting acclimated or whatever, and we're literally driving overnight on a Thursday night to get there on a Friday morning, unload. Carts are already on track. I mean, you guys know that whole, scramble that happens.
Right.
And a lot of that was just, we either had school or my dad had work, and it was, there was budget constraints. So we had challenges going in. So we had a decent year. We were happy with how we did. I think I won a race or two, but we were, we always had a decent showing. But, our class at Road America that year was over 100 carts. I think we've talked about this before. Like there was 3 flagmen because it was a Le Mans stage start, but we were in the carts. We didn't run across the track. But the carts are, basically all side by side, lined up like we do at Machismo, but there's 100 of them.
You can't see the flagmen then.
No, so there had to be 3 flagmen, and they were on the radio, so they'd all...
Well, he qualified up front.
Oh, there you go.
So back then, on the enduro races, the way they did it...
Man.
Almost. P-Pick would have been better. They did it based on your postmark for the entry.
Oh, get out of here.
So you had to mail in the entry. So we never knew if we were going to the last minute because, so we often entered at the race.
Oh, wow.
So I have a lot with pictures on my cart where I'm number 96, 78.
Yeah.
And it started at 1, So, usually with the draft, a couple laps in, you'd get things fairly sorted. But
your saving grace is I suppose you have an hour.
Yeah.
As long as the guys out front don't get out there too far.
The start had to be pretty rough, though.
The starts were insane. We actually had a pretty good system for the starts. everyone's, watching the flagman, and he basically gives you a 1 minute, a 30-second, and then they go green. And so everyone's got like timers, like, fancy watches and stuff. I had a kitchen like egg timer, and I had clear wrapping or tape, like packaging tape. It was around my wrist. So I had it at 60 and I'd hit start, and that was my countdown timer. But everyone would jump in, and like the second they'd all be revving, the second the flag would drop, they'd all go out. We would literally wait 1 second. Everyone would be out, but then we'd take off. We'd go right up the inside.
Because everyone would go to the outside
went
of
to
the track.
line. Yeah, they all go to the line, and they're all battling, and we would just have a huge head of steam. And no one really figured out that system. And we'd pass 20, 30 carts by turn one just by waiting.
Wow.
That extra second and then taking off.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
It totally makes sense.
Yeah.
Remember Bob actually was telling us a story like that where he did that system that you guys
And it was like you and Joe were on the wall and couldn't believe it.
Yeah.
He comes back around. He's pretty much in the lead, I think.
Oh, man.
Yeah,
That's
that
awesome.
system worked. But, the tough thing then was it was a motor game, right? It's not handling. When you're on a go-kart at a Road America, it's 4 miles long. It's all motor.
Mm-hmm.
And the guys up front, which were typically the team-based guys or the guys that knew they were doing the season, they would just hook up and go. And there was no catching them because if you didn't start with them, they had the motors, they started up front, they all worked together. So it was, you'd be racing, and I remember calling in like, what place am I in and where am I at? I have no idea because I don't see anything in front of me.
Yeah.
There's stuff behind me, but there's 75 of us out here on track. Like,
right.
Where am I in this game? So we definitely hit, I think, above our league that year and had some great races, had some challenging races like everyone does, but it was fun. But that was also like, I'm now starting to think about college. I've got a serious girlfriend, quote unquote serious, So there's other interests that are starting to pop up outside of racing.
Was that your last year of karting for a while right there? Or did you guys have another one or two left in the tank?
I want to say the next year, so that was 86, I think 87, which would be the year I graduated high school. We did a handful, but not as much as we had done the year before. I think part of it was we just overspent the budget the year before, so we had to scale back.
Right.
But
three of you guys racing, right? You, Joe, and Bob, right?
Yeah, that's the thing.
Oh,
There's
wow.
the three of us. And so I think that next year we did pretty much just the local stuff. We didn't do the big travel overnight races, And then I went off to high school, or I went off to college, and my brother, I think, stayed and did another season or two, but he wasn't as much into it as I was. And he wanted to play football, and, he had other stuff he wanted to do with school, so there was some conflict there. So we always stayed kind of involved, but not like those couple of seasons where we were like, that's what we did.
Right.
Yeah. And so that's your karting right there. I mean, was there ever in the karting going on there as you're coming up through the ranks and getting older, was there ever something that you like, I wanted to go do this particular race? So I guess a two-part question. Was there a particular race you wanted to do that either you did or did not? And then was there a favorite track out of all these tracks that you went to? Kind of like I said, two-parter.
Yeah, I wanted it. We only did Daytona once. I always wanted to do Daytona because that was that, and it still is. I mean, that race actually they're packing in right now for it. That race is still going on.
Yeah, Speed Weeks over there.
Yeah.
WK.
Yeah, and it wasn't. I mean, part of it was the allure of Daytona itself. It wasn't like, oh, I want to race that track layout. It was that facility, but that event at that time, it used to be between Christmas and New Year's. So living in Chicago, if you were going to go there, you would leave Christmas morning, make it in time, and then the race happened, I want to say like the 27th, 8th, 9th, and then like the Breakfast of Champions was on the 30th, which was the season championship. Daytona was the first race of the next season, but they had the championship banquet there.
Oh, okay.
So it was just a week of living in Go-Kartville.
Right.
And everyone came out. The West Coast teams came out. The East Coast teams, pros would come out. A lot of Cup guys and stuff lived in the area. So it was a cool event. It was our Indy 500, for karting. So that was always one. And we got to race it one year. And then probably my favorite track. I mean, Road America was fun, but I struggled there. I always had problems with Road America. Watkins Glen was pretty awesome. I had a great weekend there that, shouldn't have been. But that track is amazing, and to be like Formula One cars have raced here,
Right.
that was pretty darn cool.
What was you said a pretty good weekend that shouldn't have been? What was that all
what's
about?
that?
Tell us our Watkins Glen story. What's going on here?
So I want to say, like, we weren't even sure we were going to go, and then I think the push was another guy who was kind of a small independent like us. Wanted to go, but they didn't have like they had an open trailer. I don't remember the details, but it was like, hey, we'll give you guys some money to go, and it was like, okay, well that'll help pay for gas. And we had a homemade trailer. It was a flatbed snowmobile trailer with little golf cart tires on it, and we had built a box, like a plywood box, to hold the carts and our stuff. So we had room. We had 3 carts in there. We had room for one more because it was 2 levels. So we're like, yeah, we can take this guy's cart, and they were going to fly out. So we decided to go, and I want to say somewhere in Pennsylvania. This is a little bit of controversy here in terms of what really happened, but from what I know, my dad may have nodded off. And when he came to, kind of did that wheel jerk thing, and the trailer started swaying, and we lost it.
Oh, man.
So we're on the interstate, and the trailer has literally, flipped and twisted off, and the box is gone, and there are go-kart parts all over the interstate.
Oh, man.
And the trailer's done. It's, the axle's, just destroyed. Like, we literally destroyed it. Somehow the carts, because of how they were mounted and stuff, aside from some aesthetic damage, they're not too bad. But parts, toolboxes, everything just went tumbling down the road. So my dad leaves. I forget. I don't think my brother went that weekend, but I don't remember if, like, my dad's wife and my stepbrother and sister were there. But I remember we get left, I think it might have been me and my stepmom are on the side of the road. My dad's like, I'm going to go find a U-Haul. And we're picking up parts, literally gaskets and washers and stuff on the side of the road.
Oh,
I mean,
gosh.
semis are going by 80 miles an hour. And we're picking up all the parts we can and protecting our stuff. And it took him a while, comes back with a U-Haul. We literally are just stacking crap on top of each other and kissed that trailer goodbye. I remember we took I'm trying to think if we actually like chiseled off the VIN, or if we like used something to scratch it so they couldn't come find us somehow.
Oh, my gosh.
Abandoned this trailer on the side of the road. We took the plates off of it. So that's we're already delayed. We have this thing happen. We get there, we're late, of course, just the whole thing, right? And we get on track, and things just start clicking.
Did that guy say anything about his cart?
No, I mean, we told him, and I think
I
think we were relieved that like his had the least, if any, damage. It was ours that had, some scuffs and bruises and stuff.
Man.
So
Had you been to Watkins Glen?
No.
Okay, so you hadn't even been there before.
No,
All
never
right.
been there. And I remember he was just so thankful. He's like, oh, hell, I'd have packed up and gone home.
Yeah.
And we're like, well, we had to come. We had your stuff, And
Thank goodness.
that
Otherwise
was
you
the
guys-
true story. I mean, we would have gone home at that point.
Right.
It was about halfway into the trip. But it was like, we got this guy's stuff. We got to honor the deal,
Oh, wow.
So that weekend just clicked. I mean, so what had happened, I think my brother didn't go because we had entered our 2 or 4 classes, whatever it was. Basically back then it was, if you ran like piston port, which was Yamaha, you'd run light on Saturday, you'd run heavy on Sunday. Everyone ran the same class. You just bolted on an extra 20 pounds and
Right.
ran Sunday. And I think I was running controlled at that point, which is like the Reed valve engine sort of thing. And I think my brother's entry, we tried to get it refunded, and they said, no, you can't. You're past the window of refunds. We're like, well, can we use it? And we had started, I want to say things went fairly well on Friday, but then Saturday morning it all just went away. Whatever speed we found was gone. And we're like, hey, we'll use the entry from my brother. We'll use that as a class entry, as a practice
Oh, man.
for our class.
That's what I did for KPX when I was running that.
Oh, that's
I was in
right.
senior just
Yeah,
to
yeah.
get the 3 practice laps.
Yeah, that was
To
that
learn
was
the tracks,
basically
yeah.
it. So we made a bunch of changes, kind of that like, let's just throw a bunch of stuff at it. And we go out there, and I remember it was stock appearing. So I'm in controlled, and then stock appearing is the next level up. The engine has to look stock. You can do whatever you want inside of it. And we go out there, we start last because we registered that morning. And I'm like 2 or 3 laps in, I'm leading, and I'm pulling away. And I'm excited because I'm like, I am leading a race at Watkins Glen. And, maybe halfway in, we were testing with a few different things. We had adjustable pipes back then. You could actually adjust the pipe from the
While
from the
driving?
steering wheel while driving. Yeah, we'd play with the jetting and all that. So we're getting it dialed in. I remember my dad comes to the wall and was like, "Time to come in." I'm like, "Now I'm winning," you know. So we pull it in, and everyone's like, "Why'd you guys pull in?" It's like, "Well, this was supposed to be a test for for the race later today."
You guys do everything wrong.
Wow.
Yeah, we do. We do it our own, fiercely independent way. But so then I go out for my race, and everything's just going right. We've got a great lead, comfortable lead, settled in. If memory serves, we had like a 10-second lead, which at a place like
Wow.
Watkins Glen is insane because of the draft.
Mm-hmm.
To be able to be out that far,
Right.
And on your own, on your own, or did you have anyone pushing?
Yeah, no, I mean, like I worked with the group, and somehow I broke away,
Mm-hmm.
and they weren't catching. So I don't
Wow.
know if they were. I don't know, but I had like a sizable, lead.
And this is the full track, right? We're not talking about NASCAR or
full
anything like
track.
that. Yeah. You
Yep.
run the boot, the whole bit.
Yep,
Okay.
the full track, and I want to say there was 9 minutes to go. 60-minute race, 9 minutes to go. It's starting to really I'm losing the handling. I can't figure out. And it's rare to have a tire go down in endurance racing. These are hard tires. We're running for an hour,
Mm-hmm.
and I've never experienced it before, but it starts just going away, and they're catching and they're catching. I keep looking and they're catching, and this thing's just going away. And I want to say I ended up second, if I'm not mistaken.
Man.
But I come in, and we had like a cotter pin in the tire. The tire had gone down,
Oh shit.
and I was like, but given the weekend we'd had, and it's like, I'll take it.
Yeah.
That was cool.
Man. Yeah. Because, you could have been wadded up on the side of the road. That
Yeah,
would have been it.
exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Do you wish you got a chance to run that entire other class, though?
Yeah, it would have been nice. It would have been nice to, win at a place like Watkins Glen, be like, I want to race at Watkins Glen. That
Yeah.
would be cool.
Man. That's nuts.
So
That's nuts. So you end up going off to college, completely messed up the whole karting game at that point.
Your dad threw away the $1 million check you got for
Yeah,
sponsorship.
yeah.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, so kind of life catches up with you a little bit. You're doing the college thing. You go to college. At what point? Because obviously we know you got back into it. At what point do you get back into the racing game?
I think a few times during college, my brother was still dabbling. I mean, we still had all the equipment, and they'd still go to a handful, but it was all local stuff. But I was off at school, and there'd be times I'd try to come home for a weekend, but I was working my way through school, and so it just wasn't.
Sorry, I should have asked in the first. What were you going to school for?
It's funny. I started in finance. I moved to political science, and I ended up with a communication degree or a journalism degree. So like you do when you go, I got to get out of here in 4 years. What's left? But no, I actually I did some school journalism and stuff like that. But yeah, I went in with finance thinking, well, I don't have any money. I'd like to have some money. Finance is the study of money. I'll study that.
Even if I don't get it, I'll know about it.
I'll know about
I'll know
it,
it
yeah.
exists.
Yeah, about a year into that, I was like, "Oh my God, this is so boring. This
Money
is terrible.
sucks.
There's
Yeah.
got to be another way I can make money than studying it." And then political science seemed interesting. I don't know that I ever had a career objective with it. I was just really intrigued by it.
What is political science? I'm not too
I mean,
sure.
it's ultimately what you'd study if you want to get a law degree or pre-law
Okay.
or whatever. But I just found it fascinating. But I think that I was like, I'm interested in this, but it's not necessarily a career path.
Gotcha.
And I was doing, student journalism and stuff, working for the school paper and all that. And so I was like, well, journalism seems like an extension of what I'm doing.
Gotcha.
And so that's kind of where I ended up.
It's kind of funny that those are the three things that you study because I'm like, it totally makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah,
all
it
those
really
things.
does.
Like he, I
If
asked
there's
him
a pie breaking down
Yeah.
Rob Niles, those are all three
I'll
big
be in a
pieces.
meeting with him or something like that. It was like, well, actually, I know. Of course, you know about that thing.
Yeah.
It's like either he went to school about it or whatever. No, yeah, it totally makes sense, and it was actually very, very convenient because all those different elements go right into owning a business and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But we'll talk about that later anyway. So yeah, you're doing the college thing. Sounds like Joe's doing a little bit of racing or whatever, and you're not able to make it back very often. So go ahead, without me cutting you off.
Yeah,
this
no,
time.
I mean, it was, what we never totally got out. I would dabble and go play and all that. But then, I graduate school in 91 and it's, I want to get my own apartment. I want to, do all that stuff. So racing's not exactly a viable option at that point. I mean, we've seen that here, right? I mean, we lose people for that period of time where they've got a lot of bills to pay and no money coming in.
Right.
And Dad wasn't sponsoring it anymore, so it was
weird.
Yeah, I mean, even I think the few races I did in college, I had to pay my entry fee. I had to do that stuff, and I enjoyed it, but at the same time, it was like, well, money's tight.
Yeah, and you just didn't have time to mow those lawns. So
yeah, exactly, exactly. Yeah, could shovel the driveways as quickly as I could when I was younger. But so yeah, I get out of school and at this point, I met a girl who was Sylvia, my wife, in college. So we're together, we're serious. I graduate, and now the little bit of money I have, like, I start kind of getting into cycling, but I'm really becoming like super fan, like IndyCar, Formula One, and it's like I want to go to races. Like I want to go have that experience. I'd gone a few times, like. We did the tailgate to Indy 500 a couple times, when I was in high school with friends where we're literally left Saturday night and,
right.
We're left, 3 a.m. on Sunday morning, like because the night before we thought, hey, wouldn't it be a good idea if we went to Indy tomorrow? Sort of thing. So,
never actually made it into the Speedway though, did you?
Yeah. Those are totally different stories. But, so yeah, I mean, I was kind of a fan at that point, but I think that's really when things started kind of churning in my head about how can I get involved in this.
What are you doing out of college? That you've got the spare time thinking about this other stuff here.
So I kind of, bounced around a little bit at first doing some freelance journalism and writing and stuff and decided that really wasn't what I wanted to do for a career. I think for 2 reasons. One, I didn't see any money in it, to be honest. And the way you have to kind of like earn your way up, you're doing a lot of like, I'm here at the county circus interviewing, people that come in, and it was like, that was no interest, especially from the freedom you had in college. Like I actually ended up being the editor of the paper, and we started a magazine, and it was like an entertainment, like music and art and stuff like that. So it was.
You're arguably going from the top of the totem pole to below the bottom.
Yeah.
Right?
And it's not like I thought I was any better than it. I was just like, I'm so not interested in that.
Right.
So I ended up going back into finance. I ended up going into banking. So I work in a bank. I'm a personal banker. I'm the guy who comes to you to open an account and do stuff like that,
Gotcha.
And started moving up fairly quickly and, started making decent money at the time. Not a lot of money, but enough to, like our weekends, like with my wife, we weren't married quite yet, but it was like, hey, let's go up to Michigan to a bed and breakfast. Oh, and there's a race on Sunday that we'll go to, the Michigan 500.
Convenient.
Yeah, we'll just pop over there.
To be over there.
Yeah,
that's nice.
Yeah, and we do the same thing with Road America, and she was totally agreeable to it and enjoyed it as long as we had the nice bed and breakfast component to it.
Her part of the weekend, yeah.
Yeah. And then it was cool being at the racetrack,
Had she had any upbringing or interest or anything like that in racing, or is it's all your fault?
It's all my fault.
Got it. Okay, all right.
Yeah, but I mean, I think once or twice in college, she may have come to a race, like one of the kart races I did. And I remember her saying on one of the very early rides home, she's like, how can you not want to do that all the time? And I was like, I'm marrying this girl.
Come on.
Like, this is done. Where do I sign? But I'll never forget that, because I think at that point I was trying to suppress it a bit because I had the urge and the desire, but I just didn't have the means. And I think at that point I wanted to try to get into cars. I didn't want to go back to karting. So the fear was karting was accessible at that point, but I would have spent all my money on it versus I could save a few bucks. And, my goal at that point was to like go to a Skip Barber racing school. So that's what I was kind of working toward.
So you're at the bank. You're doing the banking deal right now. You're working through there, and you're super fan. You're going to these different races or whatever that's accessible, and now you're starting to think about the Skip Barber deal. Does that happen fairly quickly? How old are you, and how long does this go along before you start actually getting into a car?
So I ended up doing Skip Barber in '94, the school.
And you said you graduated in
91. And I think what had happened, I know what had happened, was quite a few guys that I had karted with along the way had now transitioned and were becoming semi-pros or professionals, and guys that I, at that point in my, kind of naive mind, I was like, I'm better than him, or I'm as good as him, and forgetting that, no, they stayed and worked at it And I went away. So yeah, at a point in time, I may have beaten them at a racetrack, but I mistakenly thought, well, if they're where they are now, I could be there. So that's what really started fueling it. And it kind of tormented me for a couple of years.
When you did the races sporadically in college, when you jumped back in the cart, were you like, I still got it? Or did it take a second to click?
It's funny you asked that, because I remember kind of going back at it arrogantly, thinking I got this,
right?
And I didn't got this. So I was rusty. Those guys were doing it, week in, week out, and I was out of shape. I was in college. I was physically out of shape. I was mentally out of shape, and I was, for my racecraft was out of shape. And so I think it was, it may have also been part of what was like, I don't need to do another one. I'm good. I'll do something else.
Right.
Right.
But it was eating away at me. Like, I want to know. And seeing some of these other guys, progress, I was like, I got to know. I got to know if I had something or not, So that's ultimately what led to me doing Skip Barber Racing School.
And where did you end up doing that?
I did at Road America.
Okay.
So that was
a place you already knew from the carts and stuff
somewhere
like that?
I knew. I lived obviously in Chicago, so that was the closest place to go. Everything else would have been a trip. Mm-hmm. So I did it like a month before my wedding. And
did you do any prep or like that? Like
no.
I've always wondered about that. Like, if you're going to go do it, do you go drive the car different? You start working on quick shifts or like that? Like, what kind of no prep whatsoever? It's like, hey, I got an idea.
Me and my Nissan Sentra just drove up to
you had a Nissan?
Sheboygan. Yeah, of course I did.
My parents had a Sentra. That's how I learned how to do stick shift.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and then my wife thought it would be a good idea to buy that car. I'm like, do you realize I learned how to stick shift? Anyway.
I got you a great deal on it.
It's 85 or 86 Sentra, whatever the hell that was.
Poor man's 3 Series, I always called it.
Oh, that's awesome.
So
you go and do the Skip Barber deal at Road America.
Go to the school, and I remember being so excited. It's probably the best word, but I remember the ride up there was about a 2.5 hour ride. And I don't even think the radio was on. It was like, I'm going to do this. Like, I was just excited, man. I mean, that was such a cool opportunity, to be able to do that. And it was literally, I always joked that Visa was my sponsor. I put it on the credit card.
Right. Yeah.
Went up, and they used to do a thing back then where it was like, I think it was called a speed week. I forget what they call it, but it was like you would do a 3-day school on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. You would do the practice day on Thursday, and then they'd have a race weekend that Friday, Saturday, Sunday.
Oh, wow.
So I had originally just signed up for the 3-day. That's all I had the money for. And I remember doing well on the 3-day, and we can go through that if you guys want. But then it was like, well, there's a practice day tomorrow, and some of the top guys start showing up. You can really measure your talent. Oh, I got to stay for that. Here's the credit card. And then
it was literally just a standard school.
Yeah.
You and anybody else decided to buy in on that.
Yeah.
And was there anybody notable in that school that you remember, or was it Joe Schmoes for the most part, yourself included, until you get to the weekend where maybe there's some notable people there?
No, there were, God, I'd have to think back, but I do remember because they took it just so happened that was the race they took the photo at for the year for that series. So I'm in the photo.
Oh, nice.
And I remember Tony Renna was there, who was an IndyCar driver. Not at the time, obviously, but he later became one. I want to say the Plum brothers.
Like Matt
and God, I forget his brother's name, but they both became sports car racers.
Yeah.
A handful of other guys that were basically ended up in sports cars. I think Robbie Buell might have been one of my instructors.
Oh,
so an IndyCar guy.
Yeah.
But the deal was like you got a discount if you bought the week package.
Gotcha.
So I remember going like, can I still get the discount if I just add things along the way? And they were like, yeah, sure.
But this was really fueled by the proving to yourself whether or not you're worth a shit or no, I should have stayed in carts or whatever. And kind of sounds like the 3-day school goes well. But you're going from having never been in any kind of race car of any kind. Yeah, I do want to know, how did that go? Like, how did you go from your Nissan Sentra to, this didn't go too damn bad?
God, I don't know. I mean, to be honest, it's, the school, the way the school is designed, it really progresses well if you understand the basic dynamics, right? Which I guess I instinctively understood. I never studied it per se, but you get all types there, right? It's always been the way with these 3-day schools. Like you've just got a handful of rich guys that are there just having fun, right? You've got usually a few guys on a corporate outing or something like that. And then you've got, there's not too many young guys, or like there's a couple of young guys maybe that are there on their parents' dime, but you don't have many people there that are in their early 20s like me going, do I have it? Do I not? But I think the instructors also really, they're really open to people that are like really serious about it, or like, but have some ability. Having later been in that role myself and later in my career working at Skip Barber, it's like, yeah, there's guys that are just there for fun. And you're like, hey, high five, we're having a good time. All right. There are guys that are literally asking like, where are the F1 scouts? And these guys can't figure out how to put seatbelts on. Yeah. And then you got the guys that are taking it seriously and they're decent. They're good at it. And those are the guys that get the attention, and I felt like I was that guy, not really even knowing that, but just being there like, I really got to get the most out of this. Like I'm hanging on every word you were telling me. How do I transfer that to this? How do I, and I knew the basics. I just didn't know what the terms were.
Yeah.
I don't think I'd used the term apex prior to that. Maybe I'd heard it in an F1 broadcast, but we didn't use those terms in karting.
Because you didn't get any proper coaching or like that growing up, right? It was learned by doing, and your dad was essentially...
the closest thing to a coach.
Well, yeah, and I wouldn't exactly say learning as he's going as well, but karts had changed since he had run, so kind of is learning as he's going as well with you.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, there wasn't any formal coaching. Like I said, there wasn't any real terminology. I'm sure my dad watched me and gave me feedback on stuff, but a lot of times it was probably more, hey, you're doing this here, try to break a little deeper. It wasn't, here's a technical way to approach it.
Right.
It was seat of the pants racing.
Right.
And it was, hey, from the outside, here's what I'm seeing. Go try this. All right, I'll try to break 2 feet later. Whatever. See if that works.
But there was no dynamics or anything like that. You didn't know the ins and outs, the hows and whys.
And that's, it's funny you ask that, because as I sit here and think back, I remember being there for that 3-day and things just clicking in my head like, oh my God, there's a term for this. That makes perfect sense. I've done that without realizing I was doing that.
Those things that you had experienced now have a name.
Exactly. Mm-hmm. Exactly. Yeah. Like I can't even, remember the terms and stuff that were just hitting me like like it was just like this big curtain got pulled back. And I was like, oh, there's science to this.
Right. Yeah.
Someone has studied this. Someone has written about this. And so that was really eye-opening, and maybe a little bit to a fault, because I was so overthinking. I was doing fine in the car. I did okay, but I was so overthinking everything. I didn't allow myself to get a feel, because I was so thinking about everything I was doing and trying to, okay, I got to match my downshifts, or, match the revs on my downshifts. I got to hit these marks. I got to turn at that point. I wasn't sitting there going, I'm just going to feel this and see.
Instead of the seat of the pants driving you were doing when you were younger, learning by doing, it was more analytical, like piecing, taking everything apart and making sure you did everything perfect instead of kind of going by the seat of your pants.
Yeah, and what's funny, how that kind of came back to bite me, was that week was beautiful. That Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday school, the Thursday practice day, Friday starts getting a little cloudy. I'm doing all right, and then it just pissed rain all weekend. So everything that I had, I brake at this point, all that went out the window.
Oh,
what do you do in the rain? You drive by feel.
Yeah.
Right? I was lost. I was completely lost. I mean,
was it your very first time in the wet? Had you done any kart races in the wet?
No.
Really?
Wow.
No. I'd never
all those
been in the
years
rain before. Yeah.
Man.
That was it. So
welcome.
I hated the rain, and that's funny how that kind of comes back later in my driving adventures. But yeah, it just pissed rain, and it was one of those. All right, I managed to keep it off the wall. Today was a victory.
All the instructors were like, nah, just kidding. We thought he had some.
Well, it was at Road America, too. So it's like that place in the rain is just treacherous.
Yeah, the kink must be nice.
Yeah.
A lot. Eye roll.
Yeah, and that's what they told you all week. Do not lift in the kink. Do not lift in the kink.
And then you don't lift, and you almost wreck, and they're like, what are you doing, lift?
Yeah.
Just going to coast through the kink from now on. Yeah, that'll work best.
So it starts off pretty awesome, and ends that way. What kind of feelings are you having from your first car experience after that? Because it was the whole, hey, do I got it? You got the sense that maybe I got something, and then that happens. So are you conflicted as you leave this thing, and what's the next step?
Yeah, I remember leaving, and like I said, I got married literally a month later.
Right.
We do a honeymoon, we buy a house, all that stuff that kind of happens. But I was like, I got to know. Like, I got to go back.
Okay, so you had just enough to kind of go, the conversation is not over. I got to do adult things over here, and I'm coming back to this.
Yeah, and my wife, Sylvia, was super supportive. She's like, yeah, go figure it out. Go find out if that was, if that's what you want to do, if that's what you're, if that's your calling, not really knowing all the other components to it, right? So I ended up going back for the finale, which I want to say was in August, September of that same year, at Road America in the dry, and had a good weekend, So I was like, okay.
What's a good weekend?
I forget. I don't think you qualified back then. I think they picked a starting order based on experience, knowledge, and they wanted the experienced guys up front and the middle guys. Right. But they did it as fairly as they could. So, being unknown to them, I started in the back. And I want to say out of 20-something cars, I think I finished 5th on the first day. It's a 2-race weekend. You race on Saturday, you race on Sunday.
Did you come back to it pretty quick?
How do you mean?
Like what you'd taken a month, 2 months, 3 months, however long it was off.
The driving, you remembered all that?
Yeah. That's a good question because I studied like crazy.
Okay.
So all the books, all the notes and stuff.
No prep to all prep.
Yeah.
Got
so
it.
I did all the prepping I could, studied the track maps, actually went back and I want to say got I think Skip Barber, you could buy a VHS tape of a lap with an instructor. So I bought that.
Oh, cool.
Watched that 100 times.
Yeah.
Just became a student of the sport right there.
Yeah. And that allowed me to go back and then start to feel it because now I'd done a million laps in my head. Man, that's an exaggeration, but I knew all the shifting points. I didn't have to think about them. So I had all that kind of figured out in my head because I'd never worked with a shifting car before. So it was where do I short shift? Where do I hold a gear? What do I do?
And then why?
Yeah. Yeah. So I had all that kind of sorted out. So I was able to go there and feel it. And so, I had that great run on Saturday. And then that allowed me to start higher up on the grid on Sunday. And then I want to say on Sunday, I was in the lead pack the whole time. There was 6 or 7 of us just trading back and forth. But Skip Barber has a policy where any contact is basically a drive-through.
Oh.
And I think with a couple of laps to go, me and another guy I think it might have been Chris Meninga or someone. I think I was right behind him and he had to lift and I just tapped him. And there was an instructor right there. And we didn't end up going in. It was a couple of laps to go. We've experienced this at Cal Speed, right? Maybe they didn't mean me, maybe that flag wasn't for me, but I ended up getting, penalized afterward. But I think I finished 3rd, but then what the penalty was, wherever.
Right.
But the damage was done at that point because I was like, okay, I hung with the big dogs and these were the top guys from the season. So I felt like, okay, I've proven to myself that I belong, whatever that means.
The answer is yes, I do have something. And now what you've done is you added so much more context to someone who now I know is very analytical, very wants to know the hows and the whys, and you're just a student of that kinds of stuff. It just must have lit the world on fire at that point.
Yeah, it did. I mean, but there was kind of it was like this 2-headed demon, right? Because there's the okay, I'm capable, whatever that means, right, of driving, but I don't have the means. I mean, I'm now in debt from a wedding, a honeymoon, 2 races with Skip Barber. I mean, I'm $15,000 in credit card debt.
What I've heard from that is racing good, wedding bad.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So it was what do I do here? How do I chase this? How do I make this thing happen? And that kind of became my sole focus at that point was how do I get back to driving? And
you're still working at the bank and everything like that,
I'm working in banking. I'm kind of moving up like the assistant manager of a branch now. I'm 25, so I'm relatively young. I got married young. But there's these 2 lives, right? I have this kind of stable home life that's on its way. My career is going up. I got married. We're getting a house. But then I have this, I want to do this thing that's super risky. And at the time, guys like Mamo Gidley and Townsend Bell, and these guys are showing up at every race with their helmet, sleeping in their car, waiting for an opportunity. And I'm looking at that going, I kind of got a nice house, and I don't know that I don't think it was till later that I figured out, like, I didn't have what they had. I may have been decent behind the wheel, but I didn't have the burning desire that those guys had. That, you know, they ended up making it. Mamo ended up getting a ride. Obviously, Townsend, I mean, guys of that, you know, there's 20 other guys that have a similar story where they were just like, this is what I have to do. Nothing else matters.
And why do you bring those guys up? Were you around them at the same time, or?
Yeah, I mean, we were of the same era.
Okay. Same age range, basically.
Yeah, and I bring them up I mean, I may not have been aware of them at the time, but now in retrospect, they were probably a bit ahead of me because they were hanging out at the IndyCar, you know, or Atlantic or whatever, but they were just hustling, finding a way. Mm-hmm. And I kind of naively was like, I'm going to go make a bunch of money so I can afford to go racing, versus them being like, I'm going to find any opportunity I can to drive to prove myself.
Right.
So maybe my method was born out of it being more convenient, more comfortable,
right,
where they were willing to.
A compromise, though.
Yeah.
I mean, it was you know, like you said, you have these other elements.
Yeah.
How do I not upset the apple cart and still get a chance to do what I would like to do at the same time?
Yeah, and I've always kind of been a calculated risk taker, you know, and that was a calculated. I wouldn't even say it was a risk. It was just calculated, you know, and I look at the guys that made it, and it took me a while to really figure that out. But now I just have so much respect for them because they were 100% focused on, this is the thing I want to do in life. This is what I have to do. And that other stuff can wait. And now they've all got wives and families and you know, but they put that priority first.
Sure.
And at that time, I didn't realize it at the time, but I wasn't willing to make that level of commitment like they were. And that's not to say that I've got the talent those guys have, or I could have made it or anything else, but I think it's a lesson to anyone that's like, you've got to really, really, really want it.
Yeah.
Above all else.
Yeah.
And that still applies today.
For sure.
You know? So for me, it was, okay, I want to race. What can I afford to do? I took 95 off, just saving, working on my career. And then I came across the F2000, the Bridgestone Championship up in Canada.
Right.
And at the time, so here's the analytical finance side of me. The US dollar was like up, you know, 50, it was something like 45 to 50 cents on the Canadian dollar. So basically a $1 US got you $1.45 Canada, or Canadian. So that series, and they had a deal where if you paid for the whole series up front, you got another discount. And I remember calling them being like, I can help promote this in America. I've got all this other stuff. And they were like, okay. And they gave me even a slightly better deal. So I was like, I got a season of racing.
Nice.
This is awesome. I got to go do this. And that was in the F2000, the Reynards.
This is in 96, you said.
This is in 96. Yeah. Yeah. I want to say I went up and I did 2 races in 96.
Okay.
Kind of put this whole thing together and then did the full season, now that I think back, in 97, 98. Up
2
in
years.
Canada.
2 seasons.
2 seasons. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And that was kind of like, through the research I'd done, my feeling was like, season 1 was your learning season. Like, you better be rookie of the year if you want to go anywhere in your rookie season, and you better win the championship your second season.
That's
if you
the way
got it,
yeah.
that's what it takes.
For sure.
So that was my objective going up there. It's like, season 1, I want to win some races, be rookie of the year. Season 2, I want to win the championship, and then boom, straight to IndyCar.
That's how it works.
Yeah, exactly. it didn't go that way
No?
for me. No.
Which part? The IndyCar?
Yeah, it didn't end exactly the way I'd thought. So
How did those 2 seasons go?
they went well. The first year, I think I won like the final race. So, and the way they did it was they were all double headers. So Friday was practice qualifying day, and then race Saturday, race Sunday. So out of, I think it was 5 weekends, so it was a 10 race series. And so I had some podiums throughout the season, was kind of hit or miss. And then I literally think I won the last race of the season, which is, you know, terrible leading into the off season, because you're like, oh, what next year is going to bring?
Right,
you know?
right, yeah.
I guess it's better than, you know, than the alternative. But, and then that second season,
Did you get the Rookie of the Year?
I did not.
Oh.
Okay.
No, some Brazilian came and got it. Yeah.
Do you remember a Brazilian's name?
God, his first name was Anderson, and I can't remember his last name. But I know he went on to do sports cars and stuff, and I think he ended up staying in Brazil and doing some Brazilian NASCAR or something crazy like that.
Solid driver though, no matter how you scratch it.
Yeah, no, he was good. He was a natural talent. So the next year, so 98, I think I finished on the podium every race. I think I may have had 1 or 2 DNFs, but if I finished, I got hardware. So I was really happy with that. And then they had a shootout. This was kind of back in the early days of like the Red Bull shootouts and stuff. So they had a shootout, and the deal was going to be for a full ride in the US F2000 series. So went up to the shootout. And so this program in Canada was the one where it used to be the Players Development Program. So it's where Greg Moore and Alex Tagliani and Patrick Carpentier and all those guys kind of came up through. Jacques Villeneuve. They all went through this program. So they were some of the judges that were going to come back. So I was like, oh wow, this is awesome.
Right.
And so I go to the shootout. I did well, but I'm 27 years old. I'm married, and I live in the U.S.
Yeah.
So I wasn't going to win it on any of those things. And there was better guys there than me. I mean, truth be told, there were guys that had more talent, were younger, and I honestly forget who won it, but I know he races sports cars these days. So that was cool. It was kind of like I was happy to be invited. Just to be nominated was fun.
Right.
Yeah.
To be in the conversation.
Yeah, and what really sparked it and kind of led to the following stuff was I remember at the final race I got talking with, I think it was the owner and the chief instructor, and the chief instructor was getting married and possibly moving on, and they were going to need to promote and pull people up. And he said, "You ever thought of instructing?" And I was like, "Really?" Like that was cool to be asked. And yeah, if you think about it, we'd consider hiring you. And I remember looking at my wife, and she's like, "Yeah, we're not moving to 2 hours north of Toronto, Canada. Sorry." Sorry.
That's where she draws the line.
Yeah, exactly.
Just the side of sorry.
But it just, at that point, I was like, wait a second. Here's another option. Because at that point,
you hadn't even thought of any of that.
Yeah.
I mean, not since you were a little kid doing the instructing. Had you done anything like that before?
Yeah, and I think at that point, I had worked out in my system like, okay, I'm decent. I'm not the next Senna or anything like that. I'm decent. I can hold my own.
So this finale, this scenario, you feel like, okay, I have shown that I can drive, but you've kind of gone, I can drive. I probably am not going to go all the way.
Yeah, it's a hobby.
And you've gotten comfortable with that. And then right at the right time, you get this little birdie in your ear that goes, you could do something with that talent.
Yeah. Yeah, and that was it. That was the first time that I thought, well, wait a second. I can have a career at the racetrack. It doesn't have to be in the race car. And that's really what perked up in my head, so, that was the end of 98, and we're still living in Chicago, and we decide in 99 we're going to move to California. Or no, we moved to California at the end of 98. So these two things are kind of happening simultaneously. So we moved to California.
What's the move for, if you don't mind me asking?
We were just, it was really Chicago weather had kind of done us in, and we'd always wanted to be elsewhere. And me being in banking and my wife being in the, the retail fashion industry, it was like, okay, it's New York or LA. Those are our two options. And
Chicago wasn't one of them.
No. And Chicago is a great city. Growing up there, you take it for granted. Anyone I meet's like, oh, I love Chicago. I'm like, how long were you there? 3 days. When were you there? June. That's why.
That's exactly what I say about the Northwest.
Yeah, exactly.
It's funny you said that. He starts off with the weather. I'm like, that's why I wanted him.
Yeah. But, we were both of us were kind of regularly going to New York for our jobs.
Ah.
So we were getting enough of a taste in New York. I mean, we were both there probably once, for a week, every 6 to 8 weeks. So we were kind of getting a taste of the New York life and both realizing there's the excitement and everything else, but from a weather standpoint, it's really more of a Chicago thing.
It's a lateral move there.
And from a cost standpoint, all the other stuff. So we were getting the best of New York. That was, when she would go, she'd be staying at nice hotels that her company was putting her up with. She was getting taken out to nice dinners. We're like, we could never live like that if we lived here, So
those trips to New York almost helped you scratch New York off the list.
Yeah, sounds like it.
Yeah, basically. And she was always like, well, I deal with all these people in LA. They're such flakes. And I don't know if I could live there. And I had a buddy who was out here and from high school, and I'd visited him a couple times. And I was actually going to like a conference for work in San Jose. And I was like, I'm gonna do a layover in LA. What was originally going to be like a 4-hour layover, him and I were going to meet and have a drink and just catch up. Ended up being an overnight. I changed my flight, went back to his house, with his wife and his kids. And I was like, I remember calling my wife. I'm like, yeah, we got to move here. Like this is paradise. This is what we need to do. And
it is, if you spend any time north of like California, any of the like decent weather, like Chicago, if you're in the Northwest, you come down here and it's rarely shitty weather.
Yeah.
It's freaking
Get a few
nice.
weeks out of the year.
Well, and I want to say it was like, this was probably March-ish. So it's like when Chicago's just thawing out, but everything's just ugly and dead and just starting to come back to life. And you come to California and people are surfing and
it's been summer for
exactly. Summer has never stopped.
Yeah.
Exactly. But so that's what ultimately kind of started the whole process of the move. And so that season, while I was racing in Canada, we were still looking and kind of figuring out the California thing, putting the house on the market and all that. So, but we did the typical like quit our jobs, no real prospects. Got an apartment, sold our house. I cashed in the little bit of money I'd put into my 401k, and we moved out here.
So moved out here, and you didn't already have something lined up? Nope. Oh, wow. I did not know that.
I was able to do a little bit of telecommuting and kind of the transition. So I had a paycheck for a little bit of an overlap. And she ended up just, taking a job at like a screen printer just because it was something, it was local, it was available while she was putting resumes and stuff out. But she was we were both on career paths. I mean, when I left banking, they were like, you're crazy. I was working for Citibank. I was, assistant manager of a branch in downtown Chicago. I was like the youngest guy, and they were like, you're crazy. I remember when I told my boss that I was resigning. She's like, I'd like for you to see a psychiatrist before I accept this resignation.
We have a great one on floor 37.
I have an appointment because I think you're going through something, and I think I'm like, yeah, I'm not going to do that. Yeah.
You're right, though. It is.
But they're calling
it's called racing.
Yeah.
You're in Chicago. They're going. You're crazy. You want to leave all this stuff. Like, have you been to California? Like, exactly. Do you have any idea what it's like out there?
I definitely think there's a sense of like, don't leave, because then we all have to face our own.
Oh man,
why we're not leaving and stuff. So
yeah.
But so I come out here, and it was really just kind of like getting my footing. But probably one of the first things I did, no joke, was like, I got to go find this Jim Hall kart track.
Nice.
That I'd known about. I'd seen it in the back of Road and Track magazine and Car and Driver, all my life. And I was like, this has got to be the mecca of karting. Like, I literally thought I'd pull up, there'd be this, golden arch over it. And, this is, And it was nothing more than a small roadside kart track, but
beautiful Oxnard.
Yeah. But I was like, this is the thing, man. They've done the training. And if I'm going to get involved in racing out here, this is where it starts. And so I ended up meeting Jim and just said, hey, here's my background. Here's what I've done. Can I come work? Can I come, just shadow and work for free and just kind of learn? He's looking at me like, are you crazy?
He's like, I've been getting a lot of that lately.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. Do you want to go see a psychiatrist before you start working here?
I should actually do all of our interviews like that, actually, when we start out.
Yeah.
I'd like to get a job at CalSpeed. Are you sure?
Yeah. Yeah. But yeah, that's kind of how that transition started.
So you come out here and immediately you look up Jim Hall. Do you end up getting a job at Jim Hall, and do you get back into karting, or I know that you end up continuing down the instructor, well, I should say not continue. You do start down the instructor path. How does that get started?
So the friend of mine who I came out and visited, now we're living out here. He gets invited. I think they had a BMW, so they get invited to this BMW driving event, an arrive and drive event. Like I think it was like at El Toro, the old Army base, and it's one of these things where BMW's got all their latest cars, and then they have all the competitor cars. So they got the Mercedes and they got the Jaguar, and they got you can drive them all back to back, sort of thing. And it's just kind of like this customer retention sort of program. So he gets invited. I go along with him, and he's driving. I just get talking to one of the guys, and turns out they're like, yeah, we're all basically race car drivers. We all work for Skip Barber. This is one of the gigs we do. It's like one of the traveling gigs. And I was like, well, how do you get this gig? He's like, oh, you gotta, this is the guy to call. This is the guy to talk to, And I told him my background. He's like, oh, yeah, you're perfect. That's exactly what we'd be looking for. So I went from, had you ever thought of doing this to this thing? And I'm calling this guy. It's Terry Irwood. He's the chief instructor for Skip Barber, and he's in Florida, and the local tracks up at Laguna. And he's like, yeah. He goes, here's how we do it. You go up and you shadow a couple of schools. We see if we like you or not. If we do, we try to start working you in. If not, we just don't call you back. So
thanks for being honest.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, I went up to, he set me up with a date up at Laguna. I went up there and, worked, I think, 2 weekends for free, just kind of shadowing and watching. And they offered me a gig, and it was kind of like, we'll use you where we can. Everyone was independent contractors at that point. So, but you start on the driving school, which is like a lot of teens and wives that are there while their husband's doing the 3-day racing school. So it's basically people that either don't know how to drive or really don't want to be there. It's definitely the hazing for a Skip Barber instructor to teach the driving schools, because you're on the skid pad all day. Oh. Your right seat.
What kind of car was it?
It was Dodge Neons.
Okay.
Yes, it was.
And then at the end of it, we brought out the Vipers.
Oh, nice. Wow.
Yeah. But
because the Neons, they actually had like race ready ones that you could buy, right?
There was a whole Neon series made.
Yeah, there was a Neon series that was huge.
I remember
that was the Spec Miata before it was Spec Miata.
Okay,
correct.
Gotcha.
Yeah, the Neon Challenge.
Yeah,
gotcha.
It was, and they had all the stupid '90s colors all over everything. Everything is neon. It was. It was dumb.
The guys drove them to the track. That was the whole thing. But you could buy the race ready package with like the roll bar and the fire,
all that stuff,
and the upgraded brakes. Yeah,
it's actually a pretty cool program. Yeah,
and those cars surprisingly handled well. For the abuse we gave them there. We probably sold more Neons than any Dodge dealer did, because people were like, if they can stand up to what you just did for the last 2 days, and you do that every day, I'm getting this for my kid, my wife or whomever, Probably a lot of upset kids that were like, no, Dad, wanted that 3 Series,
You're like, you're going to need the roll cage.
Yeah. But I mean, it was a busy time. This is kind of during the whole .com era, and the Silicon Valley is just blowing up. So, and we're at Laguna, so there's a lot of money flowing around up there. So there's tons of events going on, which worked to my advantage because I was free. So I was like, put me on anything you got. I'll just start learning.
So you're starting off, the hazing part you said as the instructor, but what did that progress into? I'm assuming you started to coach in the Formula cars at some point, but were you doing event managing, anything like that?
No, I mean, I was just, one of the guys low on the totem pole doing the driving schools. But I kind of resolved at that point. I was like, I'm going to treat this like graduate school. Like, this is going to be my racing education. Like, I am going to take in every bit and piece of it, but I'm going to try to move up. Mm-hmm. And so my goal was always teaching the racing schools, and then the ultimate is the race series, to be part of the race series. So
were you working at the same time, or is this like your only gig?
No, this became my gig.
Wow.
Yeah. So I was.
This is the month. This is the check.
I want to say this was like $125 a day.
Oof. Wow.
And they'd put you up in a hotel. We were in this. Oh, that was the stories at that hotel, but
they've since bulldozed it, so they get rid of the story.
Yeah,
probably should have.
Erase this place of the sins.
Yeah. It was. It was. Like I said, I just saw it as an education. It wasn't about what I was making. It wasn't about. It was like, I'm learning. I'm exposed. I'm at a proper racetrack. I'm at the racing school to be at. There's quite a few professional drivers that were instructors at the same time, so I'm getting exposure. So I'm like, this is it, man. This is grad school for me. This is where I'm going to learn. So I think I progressed primarily because I was just so available. And I was like, I'd come up for a 1-day program. I'd literally drive up the night before, be there if they needed a fill in, and drive home that night. And it was a 5-6 hour drive.
Yeah.
But I'm like, I'm just going to be available. And that was a big part of it. And then the more available I was, the more programs I taught, the more I learned, the more people I met in the program, and it just kind of progressed. So when I kept saying, get me on that race school, get me on that race school, when the opening came, it was like, well, he's ahead of the line.
Yeah. Saying yes more than no helps out a bunch.
Yeah. And when I got into it, I mean, I don't want to knock anyone that has taught there or anything else, but there's a lot of drivers there that are either like trying to become racing drivers, or they're kind of part-time racing drivers, but they're not exactly paying their bills. They're not trained instructors. They're not trained trainers, right? They're race car drivers. So it's kind of a do what I say.
Yeah.
It's not connecting. And I kind of took the time, and I'm not saying I was the only one. There was definitely plenty of excellent instructors there, but I saw there was an opportunity to be like, hey, I'm not putting up results like these guys are. You need those guys. Skip relied on those guys to be like, hey, your instructor this weekend could be at Daytona next week, or could be at Indy, or could be at Le Mans next month,
That's the carrot.
But if you wanted to learn something, you needed other guys. And I think they kind of secretly knew that, because they would pair us in teams. There'd be 3 instructors for a 3-day school for a class, and there'd be 2 or 3 classes going on simultaneous. And they always paired us with, there'd be the name guy, there'd be the veteran, and then there'd be kind of like the young, energetic guy. And I was the young, not so young, but energetic new guy who was like, I'll go straighten those cones. I'll make sure they're right,
Yeah.
So we get this exercise done right. So I think that I started to kind of build in today's verbiage, a brand, where it was like, this is a guy you can rely on. He's going to be here. He's going to be on time. He's going to be sober. He's going to.
It's a big line out.
It's actually a real thing
that was
weren't
important.
about, though.
That was very important back then.
Especially after all those hotel stories, I'm sure.
Yeah. So
you spent some time at Barber, right? You start working your way up through the gigs. Speaking of working up, where does this work up to, and how do you parlay your experience at Barber into the next level?
So a couple of things happen there. I mean, I'm starting to meet, not only drivers, but team owners and guys that are interested in racing. I'm starting to understand better how it works, right? And there are guys there that are 100% there to find a sponsor, drivers. They're like, there's no better place. I'm at Laguna, Silicon Valley's right up the street. We're doing corporates every week. Guys like Elon Musk and, those guys, that we now know were there, bringing their groups out, became kind of regulars. So these guys were connecting themselves with those guys, and these guys were funding drivers just more out of like, I just came into a stupid amount of money. You look like you need an opportunity. Here you go.
We were talking to Craig Stanton. He was telling me when he was working with the POC, and it was almost like some of these big name guys were like, it's almost like their horse. In the race. So like, I've got Craig Stanton, or I've got this guy, or whatever. It was the
absolutely.
Same. Yeah.
And it would just be during practice that they're making some BS bets on these guys,
Yeah.
Well, and what'd be funny is that, a lot of those guys, were either buying access because they wanted to be in the paddock, they wanted to be somebody, or they just were, genuinely like, once they understood how racing worked, and they'd see these guys and be like, man, this guy's, like a guy like a Craig Stanton or someone like that, they'd be like, this guy just needs help, and I can easily write a check because I just got $300 million in stock options last week.
Right.
I can write a check for $30,000 so Craig can go do a race. I don't know the exact economics, but there was quite a bit of that at that point. So I was starting to see that, but I wasn't so interested in finding someone to sponsor my driving. I was like, what kind of business opportunity? What can I put together to bring value?
Did you get offers like that though for driving? Or were you weren't even really trying to be fair?
I wasn't trying, not the way those guys were, because I didn't feel like I had the resume they did. They were a few years younger than me. They were all actively doing something. I, at this point, had, so just to backtrack a little bit, so at some point in those first year or two at Skip Barber, I'd been working with Jim Hall, and I decided that I wanted to, Jim had an Arrive and Drive shifter series. And the prize was I think it was like a race weekend at Russell in the Formula Mazda. So I said to Jim, okay, and I was only working for him periodically at this point. I was kind of working more at Skip Barber. I said, hey, I want to run that series. And can I run it? He's like, yeah, but it can't be for employees. So
run in or run the?
Run in.
Okay.
I wanted to race it because I wanted to go for that prize.
Oh, look at that.
So I race that series. I win the series. I get the prize. I get to go do the weekend at Russell.
That's a conflict of interest, sir.
That's why I quit. Yeah. See, that's why I tell you guys you can't race while you work here. Yeah. So I won that. I got to do the thing at Russell. And this is kind of funny how the bug gets bit again, because it ends up being, I'm always showing up at like the season championship race of things. Yeah. So
all eyes on you.
Time.
Yeah. It's the finale of the Russell series. And it's like Scott Speed, and I don't remember if like Allmendinger was there, but it was kind of like that class of guys were there running the Russell program, and right before the Red Bull thing and all that stuff happened.
And also this old guy over here.
Yeah. But I mean, again, I remember putting up decent numbers against these guys and getting bid again. And I did get hooked up with a guy, Ed Zabinski, who had just started a pro Mazda team, and was, had 3 cars, and, was funded by a Silicon Valley guy. And the idea was Ed was going to get his racing paid for if he got someone to pay for the other 2 cars. But I don't think he was getting anyone. So it was like, hey, I need to put these cars on track and get, some attention to this thing. So I ended up getting, an offer from him to drive one of the cars. And
so you're doing the instructing thing at Barber. You get this opportunity through the Hall deal. And this gets you hooked up with somebody who has a Pro Mazda team?
Basically, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. And he was, I think it was my results at Russell was something current that I had to show in that basic car. And he lived in the area. So he was out at, Laguna, and, was kind of familiar to all the instructors. And I think he'd work a program every once in a while when he was in town. And him and I hit it off. I remember we went out to sushi one night and just got talking. And, hey, what are your goals and stuff? I said, well, I'd love to run Mazda. I'd love to run Atlantic. And, well, I got a Mazda team and I got a seat. And if you can cover some basic expenses, I'll put you in the car for the weekend. So that weekend was, I think it was the IMSA. It might have been I don't know if it was the Indy. No, it was the IMSA race. It was sports car at that time. This was between IMSA sports car and then back to IMSA at Infinium, which is Sears Point. So that was my debut race.
Have you had any time there before?
Just in the Russell car, because they were at Sonoma.
Okay.
So
Gotcha.
I'd been around the track, before, and I had the results there. So that worked out great, because I was like, okay, at least I know the track.
Right.
But I didn't know the car, because it's going from a school car to a proper race car.
Right.
The school car is on treaded tires, the race car is on slicks, the race car, the wings actually do something, and the engine's not tuned down. Oh my God, I remember going out. I want to say it was my first session, and I'm on slicks, or I'm on stickers. And I go pulling out of the pits, and I'm like, there's something wrong with this car. It will not turn. The wheels are spinning. I mean, they're like, give it half a lap. You'll be fine. This is my first time on a radio in a car. So I'm just like talking like I'm having a conversation. I'm telling you, I can't drive this thing. It's crazy. It's the chemicals from the mold. It'll be fine. I'm like, no, I'm telling you, there's something wrong.
The guy that put you in the car, he's like, oh God, he takes out the headset.
Yeah, one of these guys.
Yeah.
Ricky, calm down. Ricky.
Yeah, exactly. What did Ed bring us? But, we had a decent weekend. I think I qualified 5th. It was like my first race ever, and I qualified like 5th. And this was back when Mazda had like 40, 50 cars in the field. And I think we got DQ'd because everything in that series is spec. And Ed also ran an IMSA car. He ran a Lola. And the bump stops that they put in, the shocks, were from the Lola.
Oh man.
And they're supposed to be the Mazda. And obviously, it's not a performance thing, but it has to be that spec part.
Yeah.
Right.
So I went from starting 5th to starting like 45th. And the weekend didn't go great from there on out.
Do you remember the reaction though when from the team when he came in after quali? Were they like, "Oh shit," or were they, were they surprised at all? Or?
Well, they did it because there were so many cars. They did it in 2 or 3 groups, so you didn't really know where you qualified until they posted.
Gotcha.
So like because I might have been like the first group or the second group. So I remember there wasn't like an immediate. It was like, hey, that was a good run, but they're not really watching what everyone else is doing, because this isn't the super pro level stuff.
Mm-hmm.
They're just waiting for you. Do you need a tire change? Do you need a this? Do you need a that? And I wouldn't say they're exactly, super invested in how you do. It's like, we're here to do a job. Our job is to service the car.
Right.
Yeah.
But I remember that going up and just being like shocked, like looking at that thing being like, is this just the grid order? Are they doing it in reverse? Am I 45th? Do I have to, like just being totally shocked that I qualified at that level, and then being totally gutted when they took it away.
Yeah.
But that was, and Ed was super cool about it because, so I ended up working my way up through the field, and I ended up getting taken. I got collected in someone else's crash and got taken out. And Ed said to me, you know what? We screwed that up. You deserve a better run. I want to give you another weekend. So he's like, Laguna is the finale, and it's the Champ Car finale, or kart at that time.
Yeah.
Or it might have been Champ Car. I don't remember. And he's like, that's our finale. I want you to come and do that one. I think there was one race in between those two that he invited me to, but I couldn't go to. It was a flyaway race, and I had a conflict. So I got to do the Laguna race, and that was...
Which you've been around 1 or 2 times at that point.
At that point, yeah, I'd had some experience there, so I felt
only in a
comfortable
neon,
about
though.
Yeah. I was really fast in a neon.
Be some fenders on this Mazda here.
Yeah. So that was a cool weekend. The bummer about that weekend was that Tuesday was 9/11.
Oh, no
wow.
way.
Yeah. So everything changed, so much, and that whole race, whether they were going to do it or not, and they ended up doing it, and it became like the Patriot, race. And I don't remember all the details of it, but there was obviously a very somber mood to the whole thing. And I had a couple of potential maybe help you out kind of guys that were going to lined up to come. And when 9/11 happened, I mean, I talked to both of them, I think 2 or 3 days later, and they're just like, Rob, the world just changed, man. Not going to happen now, which was fine. I mean, it was a long shot going in, but it was kind of like I was trying to get some momentum going.
Right.
But I remember in retrospect thinking like, that really put a final end to me like pursuing that, because I was like, okay, that's the reality. It was a long shot, and that's the reality. Had those guys come and maybe been like, oh, maybe we'll try to find something, it might have lingered on. And, but it was like, I kind of went there going, this is probably going to be my last race.
Yeah.
And I was fine with that. And it was a good week. We did okay. I think I finished 12th or something somewhere. Kind of the highlight of that weekend was Speed Channel before it was, I forget all the iterations of
Vision.
It. Speed Vision. I think it was Speed Vision back then.
I think it was Speed Vision.
Then it became
Speed Channel.
and
then Speed,
So it was Speed Vision back then. They only put cameras on a couple of cars, and we were pitted next to their compound. And Ed, the team owner, ended up befriending them, and so they put cameras on our cars. I think they had extra cameras because basically they would. I think that, I don't know if the network or the series or someone would pay for, here's the cars we wanted on, but they put 2 on our cars just optionally, like as a favor. And I had everything happen in front of me that race. So like during that broadcast, there must have been 4 times they went back, and they even like the commentators were saying something like, This Rob Niles guy has a front seat for all this stuff, So that was like the highlight.
Can I go on YouTube right now and find that stuff?
Possibly, yeah. I think I have it. I think I actually have it. I'll have to dig it out.
As soon as we're done recording, I'm totally looking that up. That is phenomenal.
I had I was on the opening lap. There was like a car spins in turn 2. I go around that. We're going down into turn 4. 2 cars come together, and like the entire A-arm right front assembly of a car comes at me, and you see me, the camera's up above me, you see me duck my head, and the part goes like past over my right shoulder, like not super close, but close enough.
Makes you feel like it's close enough.
Yeah. And I was like, I got some TV time out of it. Maybe not for my accomplishments so much as, my view, but
wow. That's nuts. So you end up, you have this opportunity, it's a great opportunity that happens. Obviously, 9/11, stuff like that happens with the impact that obviously makes on everything. Never mind your particular or anybody's racing endeavors at that point. But to you personally, it kind of puts a pin in the, am I going to try to become a race car driver scenario?
Yeah.
How quickly, or how do you walk away from that weekend? Do you literally go, okay, you were going into it like this is probably my last one. As you say, a few days later, you talk to your potential backers and whatnot. It ends up becoming like, I'm not going to be the race car driver guy. What do you do from there? And do you go all in on the instructing thing? And how do you take that to the next level?
So what was kind of happening simultaneous or earlier that year is I started putting a business plan together for a traveling kart program. And I'd actually presented it to Jim Hall. And it was to essentially kind of franchise his school and be like, let's take this school to different tracks, because right now you're in Oxnard, which is a drive from anywhere in LA. And let's take this on the road. Let's take this to different tracks. Let's take this to Vegas. Let's take this to different places. So he had said, okay, I'm possibly interested, put a business plan. So I kind of cobbled together a business plan over that summer. And I don't remember the exact timing. I want to say I'd already presented it to him at that point by this race. And he kind of looked at it. And I remember like his lawyer was present, like it was a proper meeting. And it was, you know what? This isn't for me. I'm happy with what I have. This is a decent plan, but I'm not interested. So I'd had this plan that I really believed in. And I was like, I'm going to pursue this. I want to see if I can create something and modify this to whatever I need. But I think there's a program, because at this point, you know, Moran is open, you know, the kart track, and Adams is going strong, and there's clubs at every track, and there's 200-300 racers at every track. And, you know, my thought was like, let's take karting to the people. Let's have this traveling program. And so I hadn't really done much with it after Jim had said no. I just was like kind of refining it and going, okay, if Jim's not going to be involved, how do I take some of the things that were specific to his operation out and make it something new and unique? So that's what I'd been kind of working on. And so when that final race happened, I was like, this is where my energy has to go. And we had that summer put together a fun, this is kind of like where the seeds got planted among a bunch of my buddies that were, you know, drivers and instructors. We did I think it was a 6 or an 8 hour endurance race at Marina Airport up in Monterey.
You used to have I got a chance to race there with Pro Kart. I believe it was the same place.
Yeah,
right?
the airport track.
Yeah.
And it's just painted lines on concrete. Yeah. And we did that, and we basically had Johan Schwartz's operation, Endurance Karting, out of the East Coast, trucked their carts all the way across.
Wow.
We paid him. We're like, look, we'll take care of selling it out. How many teams do you need to make this worthwhile? He said, I don't know, 10, 12, whatever it was. Okay, we'll sell it. We'll fill it. You come. So he brought his carts, and it was literally a bunch of racing guys. And there was a handful of pros that came, semi-pro guys and instructors that were there. And as you can imagine, it was a disaster of a race where we just beat the crap out of everything. And the track has got no delineation. It's just literally lines. And there might have been 4 cones out there to start. So it just became a friggin', demolition derby. But everyone was like, that was so much fun. So I was like, wait a second. That idea combined with this business plan I had. So we put on where the Machismo name came from was that December, we put on a kart race. The same thing, I had Johan bring the karts back out, and we did it at Las Vegas Motor Speedway, but at the go-kart track there, which you may have seen when we were there. It was right behind the bull ring.
Yeah, the concrete one again.
Yeah. So we did a race there, kind of the same group of guys, but we did it, it was day to night. It might have been 10 hours. It might have been intended to be 12 hours, but we didn't get started on time, and we were officiating our own race.
Yeah.
Driving in it.
Yeah, that was exactly it. Like, there was no organizer. Like, I think the driver of the truck that brought the carts out was the sole mechanic. We had 12 guys. We threw our own green flag. There was no officiating.
It's an interesting Le Mans start, by the way. Throw the green in the air
then you're taking
to the
off.
go-kart.
Basically, yeah. But that was where it really all kind of came together, because that was the first one that I kind of truly organized. I put out a bunch of fake press releases ahead of time, because as soon as a pro would sign up, I'd test all these fake quotes to him. And we were all in on the joke, but we were sending it around, and trying to get someone to publish it. But yeah, people talking about how Senna might show up. I mean, this is after Senna's death, it was just crazy stuff. But that was really where those two worlds kind of collided for me, between the stuff I was doing with Skip Barber instructing and the karting stuff all kind of came together at that point.
And that was 2000. This last the actual
That was
first
2001.
quote machismo was at the end of December 2001.
Yep.
Was when that happened.
Yep.
And you're still doing the instructing thing and whatnot. At what point? Because I mean, we'll fast forward to the point where I know that the soft opening of Cal Speed is in 2004.
Right.
So 2002, 2003. How do we go from machismo beta test, if you will,
Right.
to you have a track? And what do you do in between?
So, yeah, at this point, I've got the plan, right? We've had the experience, and I meet a guy, Tim Traver, who's a customer of Skip Barber. He's racing in the series. He'd had a company get bought out by Yahoo, and he was successful as a result of that. And I shared the idea with him, I think over at dinner, and he's like, that looks interesting. How could I help you do that? And I was like, well, I need carts. I need a trailer. I need some equipment. And he's like, okay, I could get involved with that. So we put a shoestring deal together to get the equipment. And then the idea was, we were going to put on a couple of races that it was going to be a part-time kind of fun thing, but it was like, it'll pay for itself. It's not going to make anybody any money, but it'll pay for itself. And we'll bring the truck and trailer to different tracks, and we'll do kind of what we did, but with our own carts, better equipment. So that's, I think we incorporated February 1st of 2002, and Tim was a silent partner. He was just, hey, I'm fronting the money for this, but you need to go run this thing and make it do something. So that was ultimately how it started. It was 12 go-karts or 15 go-karts, a trailer, and my Yukon pulling stuff, barely struggling to pull it to different tracks.
And that was for those people who've been around Cal Speed for a long time, at least on the arrive and drive side, that was the Stratus carts that we used to have. Those are the original 15 that you started with.
Yep.
And so you're doing traveling races. What kind of different places are you going to?
We're going, we went out to Vegas a couple times. At this point I've got some connections through the industry. So there's, one of the things that was also happening was because of this .com explosion, Skip Barber was doing corporates left and right, and they were bringing groups of 80, 100 people to want to do a driving event. And there's just no way to put that kind of throughput through. So they had bought like a handful of carts. And, typical, like, oh, how hard are they can be go-karts, right? And within 6 months' time, 3 of them were running. The mechanics, no one wanted anything to do with them. And I remember talking to Skip and saying, hey, I've got this fleet of carts. Like, I can bring this up, do a turnkey for you. Give me a little tiny corner of that parking lot, and I can put through 30 people an hour. And it was like, click, done. So that's what kind of helped jumpstart it. Was I'd literally drive the rig up there. I'd be working the event. Sometimes I'd be working the karting, I'd be working other stuff, but I'd be renting the carts, and it just became this super convenient plug-in thing.
So you're still doing all the instruction stuff in the race series and like that with Skip
Yeah.
Barber, and you're doing this other side gig with the karting stuff sometimes.
Yeah. I'm not making, the karting's not making any money, so we're literally begging, borrowing. Initially, all the stuff was stored at a dairy farm. Another Skip Barber customer who lived here in Ontario. The Knudsen Dairy Farm. So people probably familiar have probably had Knudsen milk before. This is their dairy farm, which has got, I don't know how many thousand, head of cows there. And for every cow, there's 10,000 flies. And we would go there to work on the stuff and just be covered, no joke, in fly crap. The car would be coated. Everything was coated.
Wow.
You'd smell so bad. My wife would be like, take your clothes off in the garage. Don't even come in the house.
Yeah.
Like,
Hose you from a distance.
yeah. But that's what we do. We'd take them out of the trailer. We'd work on them. We'd put them back in the trailer because we were just kind of borrowing whatever we could. A lot of people kind of contributed to that early. Yeah, that's a cool idea. I want to help. What can I do?
Yeah. And in this particular case, it was giving you the land, if you will, or the opportunity to store stuff there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, just here's some space. You can park your stuff here, and don't get it in the way. Okay, we can do that. We'll trade you out a couple of entries for a race.
Right.
So
how did that turn into Cal Speed?
So working at Skip Barber, we would do a couple. We had our traveling West Coast race series. So the school was based at Laguna. All of our schools and all the programs were at Laguna, but the race series was traveling. So we'd race at Laguna, we'd race at Phoenix International Raceway, Las Vegas Motor Speedway, and Auto Club Speedway. Oh, and Willow Springs. So we would go to that. That was our race series, and we'd have like 2 or 3 races at Laguna and then 1 race at those different tracks. So coming to Auto Club, at the time, what we would do is we would, similar to what I did when I got started, we'd have a school during the week, we'd have practice days, and then the race thing. And I want to say the first or second time we came to Auto Club Speedway, it was, we didn't have a lot of entries in the school. The school, we might have had 6 people, and, it could take, 15, 20. So I remember Dave Allen and Andy Lund and a couple other guys that worked here at the Speedway, and they were just, regular level guys at that point. I was like, hey, you guys want to come do this? I just met them a day or two before, but it was like, I got open spaces, and I was put on the school. So that kind of started it. But what it really started was, I think it was a 10-year deal up at Laguna that Skip Barber had, and it was coming up for renewal. And Panos had wanted to get in at Laguna with his program. So it was the first time, I think, since the last renewal that anyone had expressed an interest, and there was some whining and dining going on. And so Skip, as kind of a backup plan, was like, let's see how viable Auto Club Speedway is, California Speedway at the time, as a home for us. Because if we lose this, we need a West Coast base. They'd already been at Sonoma, as the story goes, essentially got kicked out, and Russell was there now with a long-term deal. So the only other real option was to come here.
Right.
And since I was the SoCal guy, I was kind of the one that started working with the Speedway on looking at, okay, what could we use for a classroom? What can we use for garage space? Where can we put a skid pad? Where can we do these different exercises and things we have? And at the same time, at that point, their infield course was really just the RV parking lot. So you connected the RV lots and that was it. But they were talking with AMA, IMSA or Sports Car had raced here at the time. So they said, there might be a chance. Let's get everyone together and build a track that's actually viable for all these things. And so in those meetings, I'm there as the Skip Barber representative to what the school would need, but hey, you guys ever thought of putting a go-kart track in here? Like, is there a way to do that? And that kind of came into the conversation, and it was like, well, we could, but there's no way to get to it. There's no way to park. It would be inside of the road course. And if the road course was in use, it'd be inaccessible. Right. So we didn't really talk about the parking lot. It was just, I'd really like to do a kart track here if there's a possibility. And I think the guys, like Dave and a couple of these other guys all had shifter karts here. Dave, who's now the president of the Speedway, they'd go out and play in the parking lot. And I think those couple of things, I think at one point they striped it and it was like, hey, we got something. And then someone called me and said, we might have an option for a go-kart track here. And it just kind of grew from that. We started doing some of our arrive and drives. We were a traveling program at that point. So we were going to these different tracks around SoCal, Vegas, other places, doing stuff for Skip Barber. And we started doing events here, but we kind of had the exclusive rights, if you will. But it wasn't an open, like it is now. We would have scheduled events here in addition to our other scheduled events. But at that same time, then once people saw go-karts were here, the phone started ringing at the front office at the Speedway going, hey, how do we get to race there? People who knew I was involved were asking me. And so that kind of grew into, hey, these guys want to, these kart owners want to come out here and race.
So the thought process of just using it on occasion or just for fun for the people in the know to actually know this could be a viable option as a regular occurrence really started to take hold in 2004, it sounds like?
Yeah. I want to say we put our first karts around track in like May of 2004. For some, I don't know if that was an arrive and drive event, but there's something in my records that shows May of 2004 was when we first touched down here. And then it was October of 2004 that we had the first open practice day for private drivers. And then LAKC at the time was running at Irwindale Speedway, and they had to build the track for every race.
Yeah.
Build up, tear down.
It was a big effort. And I know that I think financially they were hurting. And so someone said, you should go talk to these guys because they need a new home. I don't know what the situation was there. I just knew that someone said they may need a new home. And when I went and talked with them, they were like just about throwing the towel in. Like the towel was in the air, I think, to just fold the club. And it was like, they grabbed the towel back. And it was like, all right, we'll come out, but we don't have any money. We can't rent the track. I was like, well, I need some barriers. And they had all these barriers because it was a temporary track.
Right.
So we basically did a trade out. It's like, okay, guys, let me use the barriers. You guys can use the track. And so they finished their season here in 2004. They did, I think, their last 2 races here in 2004. And then that just started that relationship.
Wow.
And since 2005, it's been rolling.
Yeah.
It has been rolling. We went 15 years last year.
Yeah.
Off the October date. So it's been an easy 15. Because there's obviously going to be, I feel like there's going to be another Rob Niles episode at some point. We'll actually just talk about Cal Speed stuff. What I think is pretty cool, having worked for you and getting to know you over all these years, I've been here almost 10. I happen to also know you got a chance to do some other cool shit that has nothing to do with Cal Speed.
Right. Yeah.
And not a lot of people around here. I mean, you used to be here and working and doing stuff on a regular basis. And I mean, you did just this last weekend get a chance to go up there and,
work the front gate for old time's sake.
Shake babies and kiss some hands for a second.
Yeah.
But not everybody knows who Rob Niles is and whatnot. And now I happen to know that you did get a chance to do some neat things. And a couple of those things, one I want to throw out there that maybe you can tell us more about how it came about. And you didn't even touch on it at all, but I think it's bitchin'. You were like you were the main guy, the race director for Formula BMW, and you haven't hit on that at all. So how did you get that opportunity, and whereabouts in the game plan is that?
That was 2004. So basically the same year. That was the first year that I did. I believe it was 2004.
In Formula BMW, I mean, you can shed more light into it, but it's literally a ladder series, an early rung for Formula One, right?
Yes. Yeah, it was started in Germany as the ADAC series. And, it was the spec series that was kind of like the first step into Formula cars. And you would go from that either to a Renault or an F3 and then into Formula One. So for German drivers, that was kind of their official first step into a proper race car. But like at the highest level, like of course they had Formula 4, they had other things, but this was the recognized first official step if you were going anywhere.
And it's running at the F1 weekends.
And it's running at the F1 weekends. BMW's funding it. It's kind of like their junior driver program, but it's open. It's open to drivers to get in, but it was limited to, I think, 15. What was the age limit? There was an upper age limit. It was like 15 to 20 or something like that was the only ages that could compete.
Wow.
And they were truly like, we want to develop the best and the next F1 driver. And this is when BMW was in Formula One. And so this program was developed, and it was also fed into their, their sports car programs, their GT, all these different programs they had. But they decided to take it, universal or international. So they had a series in the UK. They started a series in America, and then they started a series in Asia. And what they did was they contracted out. It's kind of unique how they did it, where they owned the series, but they would contract out the management of it to a group to put it on, but to their exact spec and standards. So a group of guys that I had worked with at Skip Barber. So Skip Barber had sold the company in 2000. I think he had maintained a minority interest, and I think at some point in that window he was totally bought out of the company. So it retained the name, but Skip himself, the actual Skip Barber, was no longer involved. And so a lot of his top executives and guys had gone with him or just left when the new owners came in. So they had kind of started this new company to kind of continue some of the stuff they'd already been doing with Skip Barber, the Arrive and Drive programs. And they had a good relationship with BMW. Going back to how I got originally started was at a BMW Arrive and Drive event put on by Skip Barber. So that relationship was already there. So when these new guys started this new company, is right around the same time that Formula BMW is coming to America, to the United States. And they're going to contract to do it. So they kind of put the team together, kind of the best and the brightest from their Skip Barber days and other people in the industry. And as the story goes, as I've been told, they were maybe 3 weeks out from the opener, and they're like, we have all these specific people, but we don't really have like an eye in the sky coordinator kind of thing. Like, we need someone like as they told me, we don't know what we don't know, so we need someone to kind of fill holes as they pop up, right?
Jack of all trades, if you will.
So it was a 1 weekend deal. Can you come out this weekend to Lime Rock Park and just help. We just need help. We're launching this thing. We don't want to look like fools. Can you come out? And I knew these guys. I'd worked with them. So yeah, of course. So I came out and they said, all right. And that weekend it rained just terribly. It was just a terrible weekend, for a launch of a series. The weather was just terrible, right? And it was lower entries, and it was just so like, all right, the next one's going to be better. Can you come to the next one? Right? We really want to launch it at the next one. Yeah, sure. When is it? Okay, I can come to the next one. And I had left Skip Barber at the end of the following year. So I had left Skip Barber at the end of 2003, partially because of this buyout and the changes and things that were happening. And I was like, I'm going to try to do this kart thing full time. And I'd had some other gigs I was doing, some private coaching stuff I was doing, and a little bit of professional driving stuff, not car stuff, but not racing stuff, but commercials and things like that. So I said, yeah, I'm available. I'm very available, And by the third race, they're like, yeah, we just want to keep you for the rest of the season.
Yeah.
So I was kind of like the event coordinator,
Gotcha.
if you will. And that ended up having these different tentacles because one of the challenges we had was we raced on the Formula One weekends, and the FIA was in control of that weekend. We raced with Champ Car at the time, so they were in control of the weekend. We'd race with IMSA, and they were in control of the weekend. So they all had different rules. They all had different safety protocols. They all had all these different things. So there was this coordination that needed to happen in training because we were running by FIA rules per the German series. That was their thing. They wanted all 4 series around the world to be run identically. So I kind of became this like race director, event coordinator to make sure that we had a consistent program from race to race. So that ended up lasting 4 years.
Oh, wow.
Whoa.
Yeah,
I didn't know it was that long.
The series was here for 5. I was involved for 4. I like to think I left and it just fell apart. No, not at all. But, that kind of coincided with them, BMW getting out of Formula One and all that. But that was a blast because everything was done at the top level. BMW had very high expectations, but they gave us all the tools to succeed and kind of build this great team. So it was kind of like that. I liken it to when like the NBA players get to go play in the Olympics. It's like, all right, we know we're going to win. Let's just have fun with this. This is really cool. Mm-hmm. We had like this just incredible team of people and so many drivers that have come on, that have come through that program.
Yeah. Who'd you have? Those 4 years, and we're talking, what was it? 4, 5, 6, 7, 8? No, you said 5 years that program.
The program was 5 years. We had, God, I'd leave so many people off the list, but James Hinchcliffe, Graham Rahal, who else? Robert Wickens, Esteban Gutierrez, who ended up racing in Formula One. God, I'm leaving so many people off the list, but
was Kubica in there? Did you guys have
no,
Kubica?
He was the F1 test driver.
Okay.
And so like internationally, like Vettel went through the German program.
Okay.
Timo Glock. God, the list is so long, but Hulkenberg, a lot of these guys, all went through like, this is where you started. If you were going anywhere, this is where you started.
Got it.
And I'm leaving off a bunch of guys that ended up in sports cars and other stuff, through the years. But it was an amazing program. I was just it was so much fun to be a part of, but it was also like just so envious of these young guys to have that opportunity because they were getting media training. At every race we went to, pro drivers would come. We'd have the race announcers come and talk with these guys and do media training. They were getting fitness training. They were being put on a program. They were fast tracked. And if you had the skill, man, this was it. Like,
well,
wow.
Obviously a lot of those names we recognize, obviously, moving on up, never mind anybody else that's gone up through the program. That's something I've known about you that's just bitching that you get a chance to do something like that and at that level. And one of the other things I know that you got a chance to do that I want you to hit on is being a part of X Games. That was actually here in town. I can't remember the year. I was here, I believe, or just after. I think I was here already. Yeah, I think it was
that
here.
one. Yeah.
No, I can't even remember what the hell's going on. But what was that like? How did you get that opportunity? Because now you're full on cow speed status and whatnot for a bit. Because if I'm already here, we're well inside at that point. Because you get done with the Formula BMW deal after 8. How do you get the X Games deal? What was it, and how did the whole thing go?
I think X Games might have been 2010 and 11. Does that sound right?
That would have been just before me. I showed up in 11. Maybe
Okay.
it was 11. There's a
I feel
lot of
like-
shit
I
that
feel
happened
like-
in 11.
I don't remember.
I
yeah.
feel like that one was a little bit later because it was at LA Live, right? That you
Yes.
did.
Yeah.
I think it was
It would have
like
been
13
you know
or
what?
14.
It would have been 11 or 12, I think, because I remember when we were doing the machismo, we did machismo at Bullring, and we were talking about it being X Games like, because we were going up and into the stadium, if you will.
Oh, right.
Right,
Yeah,
okay.
yeah.
So it must have been 11 it was happening and or 12.
12. Okay.
Yeah.
I think 11 because we were talking about
Maybe
the
11,
first time.
12, or that time frame. So again, that was just guys I knew in the industry that I'd worked with, and they were the guys that started Global Rallycross, and they had done 2 or 3 races, and then I think they had done 2 before X Games, and it was a new series, so it had its growing pains and stuff. So I think after the first race, they had called me and said, "Hey, can you come out to Pikes Peak for that event to kind of train and stuff? Because we need help at X Games." And the challenge
This
with
is
X
Global
Games,
Rallycross. It was
this
saying.
Global
Yeah.
Rallycross, yeah. The challenge with X Games is obviously just there's so many other variables. It's not just a race weekend; it's a TV show. So you're trying to fit a race weekend inside of a TV show. So I went out. I mean, I knew nothing about it. I remember cramming. I literally got a call like on a Wednesday, like, "Can you be in Colorado this weekend?" And so they flew me out. I'm trying to learn about Global Rallycross. I didn't really understand it till I saw it. Like I knew rally,
Right.
I was familiar
yeah.
with rally racing, right? I was familiar with drifting. I was familiar with these different. I didn't realize that they'd had a love child and it became this thing, So, that was. I was basically the race director, and what I really became was the guy that coordinated between ESPN, the production team, and our stuff on track. It was kind of unlike anything I'd done before because it was, the rules there are very gray, right? In terms of what's, allowed, what's not allowed. You can hit a guy and push him out of a corner, right? You can do a lot of stuff and not
Right.
get penalized, and it makes for good TV.
Absolutely.
I came in probably a little heavy-handed, like I'm going to be writing penalties all day, and they're like, no, it's just it's a show. So that first year, I mean, that was wild to be kind of thrown into the middle of X Games, never having been to one. I mean, obviously I was familiar with it, but just to literally be thrown into the middle of the main event, if you will, that was a pretty awesome experience. To be a part of it. It was so stressful though, because of, you're dealing with TV times, you're dealing with trying to make all these things work. And then you get a yellow flag or you have a problem and people are just yelling in your ear, like, "You got to get this thing restarted now." And it's like, I got guys on track, I got issues. So
Do you think that that kind of that blend of not just the racing side of things, but the entertainment side, it maybe was off-putting or something like maybe it's not my
A
kind
little
of deal?
bit of a deterrent. Yeah.
It would be for me because I'm all about the race, so the extra
Sure.
stuff is tough.
I wouldn't say it was off-putting in the sense of like, this isn't pure or anything. I didn't have to me, it was eye-opening because it was like, this is the future. If we're going to grow racing, this is what has to happen. I think it was that gray line. I don't want to say of safety, but just of stuff that prior being in an open wheel background that could never, ever have been allowed. Like guys would have been banned for life for some of the stuff these guys were doing with, with full fenders and jumping and landing in each other and stuff like that. It was just kind of like, what's my job?
Yeah.
What is fair? Because I don't know this world. And I ended up talking to a lot of the drivers to get, I remember talking with Tanner Faust and with Brian Deegan and some of these other guys, like, what's fair? Were you cool with that move he did on you in that corner? Oh yeah, that's part of it. Okay, good. Like that was the only way I was going to get
an
any
understanding.
feedback is like, yeah, you guys tell me what's allowed. Because I was really more of a race coordinator at that point. We have to start at this time. We have to end at this time. I wasn't shooting the film by any means, but we were the ones making sure that the production happened within the allotted window. So it was a unique experience. I went back into it the second year, and that was the year that oh God, who was it? That
They were shooting the gap there on the jump.
yeah, the jump was the first year. The jump was dirt. It was just two big dirt piles that they made. So they were able to shape them to whatever worked. The next year, they actually made a ramp, this steel ramp. And it had worked, I want to say, they'd used it once or twice prior. But because of the space constrictions they had in LA, it wasn't working. And it was
they weren't getting enough speed, eh?
They had to. I think they had to speed up so much that it was like affecting the compression when they hit the track. Like they weren't able to when they hit the ramp. And that was the year that I can't remember his name. He was a famous Swedish rally driver.
Yeah, short hit.
Had that hard hit, and we had to get him extracted from the car. And that was just like, talk about holding your breath all weekend, because that ramp, we'd had a fire, we'd had a couple other things go on, and I'm like, I'm not cut out for this.
Yeah.
And it was moving anyways after that. I think after that it went to Austin, and I'd gotten busy, and my family and the track and everything else had taken off, and I was like, I had my fun. I get to put that on my resume. That's cool, but yeah, I'm done.
and I want to say that was the last time you did do anything outside of CalSpeed, right? Extracurricular in that regard. Big event, I think.
I think so. Yeah. Anything outside of what we do here.
Since you've gotten a chance to do those kinds of things, and obviously now that CalSpeed's kind of rolling, and we've been doing this thing for a bit, do you kind of miss maybe getting a chance to do some of those kind of things? Have you thought about throwing your hat in the ring or making a few phone calls at all to go out there and try to do some more one-off things or whatnot?
You know what I miss, and I even miss it here, is the idea of a weekend, the idea of an event.
Right.
The idea of, and it's the people, it's all the stuff that happens away from the track or behind the scenes at the track. I mean, the track stuff's exciting, but it's whether it's things like machismo, which we've even got that kind of down to a science. Sometimes it's the unknown. You don't know how the weekend's going to go. It's rolling with the punches. It's hanging out afterwards, being like, bench racing, not so much bench racing, but just like, what a day, retelling stories and
commiserating a little bit.
Traveling with the gang, and then, packing it all up and being like, all right, we'll do it again in 3 weeks. I'll see you. That I miss, but I think like anything, I think time glamorizes it a little bit, because I remember when I was doing it, I was like, I'm so done with this.
Right.
I enjoyed it when I was there, but I couldn't wait to go home. And then when it's time to leave, you kind of dread leaving. When you're there, you have a great time. You make the best of it. But, I miss that. I miss the excitement. I think that even goes back to being a kid, right? Packing up the car for the trip to the go-kart track, and the unknown, or packing up the trailer for the trip to New York or wherever we're going to go. It's like that to me was always the excitement, the anticipation of the race weekend.
Yeah. That's
the thing that I think through time just disappears a little bit, and hopefully we still provide that for our customers. Hopefully they still get that, and us for this being routine for us, I hope it doesn't get routine for them.
Yeah.
But because that to me was the most exciting thing. I remember that more than a trophy.
Mm-hmm.
If you tell me to tell me about your, this weekend, I can tell you 4 or 5 stories from it. I can't tell you what position I finished, or if I finished. You know what I mean? I don't know that, but I can tell you what we did Saturday night, or I can tell you, this great experience we had.
Yeah, well, I guess that just goes to show that there is a lot more to racing than the racing. It's the family, it's the camaraderie.
For sure.
We talked about that with multiple different people. It's not just the stuff that happens on course. And obviously as the people putting on the event, everything happens off course to a certain extent, right? And so, yeah, absolutely. There's those different elements that it's what happens outside of green and checkered that are sometimes some of the most fun and whatnot. And I guess maybe last question for you, that green and checkered, putting on the helmet and going racing and whatnot. Is there part of you that wants to at any point try to get back in the seat and maybe do something? I know for sure that we didn't even really get into it, but you just got done having back surgery not too long ago, and so the kart thing maybe is a little bit tough. But could you get back in the seat of a car and maybe go play around in a Miata or something like that? Have you ever thought about maybe jumping back in the seat in that regard?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'd love to get back in a kart. I've done some off-road stuff, because that was a little better on my back with some suspension and all that, but it's been obviously hindering me for a few years. And so, yeah, that's one of the motivations as I start to feel better is, when can I turn a wheel in a kart? When can I go back and try some of these things?
Mm-hmm.
And, I miss that. I missed that anticipation of putting the shield down and being in that, it's been a long time since I've had that thrill. You guys both still get that regularly, and it's like that doesn't, that I don't think that changes.
It doesn't get old.
Yeah,
That's
yeah,
for sure.
exactly.
It certainly doesn't go away. Once you have that itch, it may just get dull, but it's never going to go away.
Well,
right?
I think you hit on it when you talked about kind of community. That's the thing that for me karting's always provided is if you play stick and ball sports, you can talk with your buddies about it at school, after school. You don't have to leave home. You don't have to go anywhere because they all know it, right? There's someone you can talk to about football, baseball, basketball, whatever. For us racers, that doesn't exist. We have to go somewhere. Back in my day, before the internet and all this, like the only way you could get together with those guys was at the racetrack. So half the fun was just being around guys who shared the same heroes as you, or watched the F1 race or the IndyCar race or the NASCAR race, and you could chat with them about it, and you're at the track. So you're kind of in, I always called it fantasy camp because I'm in the bubble with my people, with my tribe, and then you go home, you go back to your other life, your non-racing life, and it's sharing that experience with guys. That to me was what the best part of like Formula BMW was, or even Skip Barber days was. It was a lot of like-minded people. We all had a similar passion. We all had that shared experience. Some were better than others, but there wasn't a lot of judging because we were all craving that same thing,
Yeah.
So that was the cool thing. I always felt like I'm the outsider that doesn't belong there. So I shouldn't say the outsider, but it's like I'm the low man on the totem pole. But there was almost hey, you're part of the group.
Right.
You're in the tribe. I'll go fix those cones.
Yeah, and now with CalSpeed being here since 2004, you've essentially facilitated the ability for that to happen on a daily, weekly, monthly, yearly basis, where people can go back and look at their entire careers that have been here, or just pieces of it or whatnot. But at the end of the day, the community, the camaraderie, and all those different things that you've actually created a scenario that didn't exist, that now does, and everybody can come back and experience that on a regular basis. And if nothing else, if you're not able to throw the helmet back on, if you're not able to put on that event kind of feeling, you damn sure know that everybody else is feeling that kind of scenario.
Yeah,
that's got to feel pretty damn cool that you've given that to everybody else.
No, that's it's so cool you guys say that, because that is the thing that, obviously this is a for-profit venture and that's why we do it, but there's a lot of things that happen that I'm like, man, that is so cool. I hear it from guys, at the Machismo. It's always because that's kind of such a special event. I love at the banquet every year, someone comes up to me and they're like, dude, I lost 20 pounds because of you.
Right.
Yeah. I came out and started doing this and realized that I had to lose some weight if I was going to go faster. You made me healthier, and it's really cool because there is this great group of people here that all kind of come together and make it what it is. It's funny to think sometimes that it's just a go-kart track, but it's like for a lot of people, it's a big part of their lives. It's everything for us. Obviously, this is what we do, and I think sometimes it's easy to forget because this is our job. It's what we do. We're all passionate about it, but there's people that this is what they look forward to for 29 days a month.
Yeah,
this is it, man. I was that kid, so I tried to never forget that like, hey, this is their day away. This is their day of fun, and they may not win, but they got to have a good time. They got to know that, hey, the equipment was equal, and I was treated fairly, and I had a good time, and I'm going to come back next month to get my ass kicked again, but I'm maybe going to get it kicked a little bit less. That's what I think is the cool part, is that in this sport, guys are willing to do that because it's like, I just want to be out there. I just want to be at the track. I just want to put the helmet on.
Yeah,
So,
and regardless of age, you get a chance to do it, whether you're the Munchkin start out in kid karts or you've been around for a long time doing arrive and drive or competition karting and whatnot. There's definitely a place to go do it. And again, they all have to kind of tip their hat, if you will, to Rob Nowles for putting the whole thing together. So,
yeah.
Hey, I got to tell you, every single time we get done with one of these things, I have a hell of a lot of fun doing it, and I really appreciate the people doing it. And this one's very special for me, obviously, for getting the opportunity to be across the table from you. I know Derek and I have been looking forward to this one. It was a long time coming.
Yeah,
we really
sure.
appreciate you taking the time out of your busy schedule to play with us a little bit here.
Thank you.
this is great, guys. I appreciate it. Thanks.
Thanks so much.